everyone here and those watching to the work session of the Salt Lake City Council for September 17th, 2019. The first item that we have on our agenda, well, first off, I need to excuse Councilmember Mendenhall, who is out of town. So the first item that we have on our agenda is a briefing from the Kim C. Gardner Policy Institute, and I don't see anybody from the Policy Institute. Oh, okay.
It could be, it's probably our fault, so we're finding out.
Okay, so we'll move to the second item. Do we have everyone here for, so Allison is here, and Matt, is Matt here? They're probably thinking it's later.
Sorry. I can,
Do you know what, before, is Mary Beth here? Mary Beth is not here. Okay, there's Matt. Okay, Matt, you saved the day. Okay, so let's move to item number 2 on our agenda, which is an amendment to the interlocal agreement with Salt Lake County for construction of 150 South Street between 5600 West and 6000 West, adjacent to Statler Rail. Allison Rowland is our council policy analyst, and Matt Cassell is the city engineer. Allison, turn the time over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This, with the long and frightening title, is essentially a request for the council to sign off on a pass-through of money. It's funds originating at the county being passed through to the city and then on to Stadler US Inc. Basically, it's a reimbursement for construction of an additional street that goes beyond what the county originally had contracted to have created. So it's a transfer of $2.6 million in county transportation funds to the city. And essentially, the reason for it is that Stadler was able to construct the previous 2 sections of the street for about $500,000 less than originally anticipated. So the county approved an additional street construction along 150 South, correct? Sorry. So the question is whether the council is interested, agrees to authorize approval of an amendment to the interlocal agreement between Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County, which provides for this additional street. If the council does approve this, potential action is scheduled for October 8th. And I don't know if Matt would like to add anything?
That's pretty much all about the amendment, so I have nothing further to add.
Thank you both. I'll look to the council for questions or comments. It does seem to be straightforward.
Sorry.
All right. No, that's good. Well, thank you both.
I have a question. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I didn't get, so we have a $500,000, it costs less, so $500,000 less, and we want to appropriate that and then go towards a new street.
Actually, it has already been used for the construction of a new street, or rather, the street has already been constructed.
Okay.
And the county will reimburse, or sorry, I'm going to let Matt handle this. How's that?
The streets have already been constructed. The invoices that Stadler submitted to us, they were not able to make it to $2.6 million based on the state definition of what a road is.
Okay.
So they came up short, 2.1. So to alleviate that, the county worked it out with them that they would add 150 South to the project to allow them to invoice an additional $500,000 and make it to the 2.6, which is the grant amount.
So that's it. There's no additional funds needed to finish or to pay back. Okay, great. Thank you.
Great. Other comments or questions? All right. Thank you both very much. Okay, so we are still trying to figure out item number 1. And item number 3 is a budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2019-2020 follow-up. But Mary Beth is not here, and John Vike, or can somebody?
John is on his way.
Oh, he is? Okay. All right. And then, yeah. David, would you be willing to follow up with Noel and Corey and see if they can plan on coming down a little bit earlier just because we are moving ahead very quickly? Yeah, for the Three Creeks confluence. Yeah. Do we know about how fast John's going to be down here? Yeah, all right, John. No, John.
John Vike.
John Vike.
Okay.
Okay, and that works as well. So
It takes a
Thank you.
village today.
okay, let's take a break for 5 minutes, and we'll figure it out. Okay. Okay, great. Okay, so let's take a break for 5 minutes, and then we'll be back. We will now move to item number 3, which is the budget amendment number 1 for fiscal year 2019-2020. Ben Lutke is our council office policy analyst. He will walk us through this discussion item, and then John Vike is our city budget director. So thank you both for being here.
This is the second briefing for budget amendment number 1 of fiscal year 20. The council is having a public hearing on this at the formal meeting tonight, and you are scheduled to take action on October 8th. There are 3 updates since the first briefing. The first update is about the ongoing property maintenance expenses, and the administration provided 6 years of actual expenses. This is the property maintenance that is charged to the surplus land fund. And those are shown on the staff report, the first page, from 2014 to 2019. And let's see if I can get the screens to turn on. The amounts are increasing from 2014 to 2018. It's just over $82,000, and in 2018 it was $212,000. And the most recent fiscal year, the books are still being closed, but the estimate has gone down a little bit to $169,000.
Do we know why that's gone down?
I do not. It went up 5 years in a row, so this is a change in the trend.
Okay, thank you.
I think it really just depends on the number of properties and,
Okay.
what kind of maintenance needs to be done there. So.
All right. And this, and again, the reason that we're talking about this is there was discussion about, instead of having that maintenance fund come from the surplus land account, to figure out what the amount would be to have that included as part of the general fund budget.
And we updated the draft legislative intent in the staff report to reflect that it be based on the actuals, not just picking a number out of the blue, but using this 6-year history to inform the amount included in the next annual budget. There are 2 policy questions about other expenses related to property, not just maintenance, but the management of it, the sale and the purchase. This could include things such as appraisals, brokers, earnest money, research, land surveys. If the council's interested in learning more about what those costs look like and how it's budgeted for. There's also a policy question that the administration thinks $50,000 annually would be a good estimate for the costs of sale and purchase alone. I'm not sure how the $50,000 was calculated. And the council may also be interested in an update on the inventory of city-owned property.
Any questions or comments? Where are we with that inventory? Jennifer McGrath?
Hi.
Hi.
The inventory is essentially compiled at this point. What we'd like to do now is ground truth some of that. As many of you know, sometimes the records at the county aren't always totally accurate, and we want to make sure that we have the most accurate information possible. So our next step is to go out and do some spot checking to ground truth that. But we've essentially compiled all the information into one place.
Great.
So we're making a lot of progress. And when I say we, I mean JP Goats, not me. So
Perfect. Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any questions about this before Jennifer leaves the table? Okay, thank you.
The next update is in regards to the school crossing guard. The recommendation is to move to a contract approach. It's a request for $110,000. And the council asked for updates on the locations of the crossings. And we have 2 attachments, attachment 2 and 3. Attachment 2 is a list. The list shows the school, the location of the guard, the intersection crossing, whether it's a required or an optional crossing, if it's a signalized intersection, if there are the pedestrian beacons, the flashers, and the number of guards at the location. Most of the guards are just staffed 1 per crossing. There are some that have 2. The third attachment is a map, And the red dots show the required locations, the green dots show the optional. Most schools are either required or have a mixture, but there are a few that are surrounded by only optional crossings.
So the contract that we now have for these services, how readily could we update that with additional locations should the city decide to add more crossing guards or increase the budget, or if the school district wanted to participate through us?
Currently, we don't have a contract. They're city employees, and we're looking at moving towards
Okay.
a contract, and then we would be able to adjust that based on those
Okay,
demands.
so that contract, we don't have a vendor yet. We haven't identified that. Okay, what's the time frame for having that done?
That contract has gone out for an RFP, so we have a response, we just haven't finalized the
Okay.
contract itself.
All right. But we will be able to amend that contract if we want to add additional sites.
I'm gonna have to say, I'm gonna have to read it, but I would assume that we would have built in the ability for capacity expansion.
Okay.
But I'd have to read, yeah.
Could you let us know on that
I
one?
will,
Because
yep.
I hear regularly, and when we had our meeting with the school board, that was one of the questions that they had as well. So
Okay.
that would be helpful.
I'll get a straight answer for you.
Okay. Thanks, Noel.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilmember Fowler.
No, you should probably stay there if you don't mind. I mean, maybe you're not going to be the person to answer this question, but so how do we determine which schools, and if you can't answer this now, maybe it's just something we could follow up on, which schools are optional and which schools have required, and the ones that it appears look like they only have optional, do they actually utilize that option? And is there a way to perhaps change it from optional to required? Those were a lot of questions, but I think you get the gist of what I'm looking for here.
Yes, and I'm going to look behind me. Those determinations are made solely by the Transportation Division, so I should let them answer that. We've just managed the personnel. The placement, the design, the application is all managed by Transportation.
Okay. John, you look like you want to say something.
And most of that is governed by state
Oh, okay.
policies and procedures. So
But is the state policy and procedure a minimum, and we can go, like the floor, and we can go above the floor?
And that's the difference between the required and the optional. So the required are the state minimums, and then the optional exceed what the state requires.
Okay,
That's correct.
and then, but if we wanted to have more required than what the state offers, could we do that? Than what the
Yes.
state sets that level at?
Yeah, it's really a matter of funding.
Okay,
So,
fair enough. Most
yeah,
of it
it's-
comes down to money.
like so many things, it's based on the elementary schools get the first priority, and I think those are the only ones under state statute that are actually required. And then it's based on the number of elementary school age children that cross at those crosswalks. And then it's kind of, then we work on down from there, from the required. The optional list is very long. So,
Okay, that's answers it enough for me. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Johnston.
Follow-up question on that as well, Mr. Larson.
sorry.
It's piggybacking on that. I know there's certain thresholds we have to look at about volume of kids. This came up with Franklin Elementary because there's a mandatory crossing on 4th based on the size of the street and the number of crossings, but there's not even an option one on the front of the building. That's in the back of the building.
On 3rd South.
Yeah, on 3rd South, and the neighborhood came up with this, and that's where some of the traffic calming discussion we had a while back about the additional funding to help with things like this. How would we look at things like that are not necessarily based on volume, but are identified by neighborhood as a traffic calming problem? How do we figure out where we take what money from where to address it?
Yeah, and that's I mean, you can hit it from a couple of things. One is just the crossing guards, but that gives you just coverage during that time, during 9 months out of the year for an hour or so in the morning and afternoon. Or you can look at, capital investments that would slow traffic all day, every day, which, is costs more upfront, and then it's just harder to do a lot of those. But once they're in, then that's a longer term benefit. So one of the things that we've done that actually just wrapped up this week is we chose one crosswalk at each elementary school and did just using paint so that we could kind of spread our dollars. We did painted bulb outs, and we did one at Franklin Elementary. And so we're kind of trying to do everything we can with the resources we have to improve these crossings. But, I look forward to continuing the kind of the broader traffic calming conversation and what we can do to improve more crossings in more parts of the city.
I guess my question was, because we can't even get it's not even an optional crossing on the front of the school. How do we sort of address that? Can we designate that as a city, or?
Oh, as far as like designating that as an optional crossing?
Yeah. It's an internal policy. We have about 100 crossings.
Yeah, as far as, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but I just know that there's a pretty long list of optional crosswalks in the city, and that particular one would probably be, as far as based on the traffic volumes and the speed and the number of children crossing, just looking at it objectively, it'd be quite a ways down that list. So that's part of the challenge is, trying to avoid the situation of kind of, cherry picking who gets it. So I think if it's a fair, objective process, then, for a crosswalk like that one, then the question would be, okay, how many other crosswalks do we have to fund before we get down to that one on the list? Mm-hmm. That's a challenging issue.
Yeah, Cindy?
And this may be a little bit repetitive, but just kind of framing it in a different way. Is there something that you could look at just to share with the council, to give them a couple of examples? And we'd go through the mayor's office on this, but just to say, we have the mandatory crosswalks, and the way you might be able to divide the other crosswalks that are optional, so to speak, is crosswalks that meet this, and this criteria would be the first priority. You may already have that, but it might help the public and the council to understand. And then what would it take if the council wanted to give you enough money to do one or more of those additional categories? Is there any kind of
we can,
policy
absolutely.
cheat sheet that you could
we'd love to do that.
share, so that when we're talking to constituents, sometimes it feels like our office, because we don't know enough, we're in a position of just saying, yeah, no, that one isn't going to happen. And so if you could help us with some words to put with that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean,
might
so
help.
perhaps if you saw those lists and the categories, maybe you'd look at it and say, well, maybe we could fund that or fund more than we thought.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, so
Sure.
not to move around your categories or nose into your categories, but to see what would it take to expand financially,
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would just, obviously want to reiterate, we want every child in the city to be safe walking to and from school. Sure. And ideally, not just during those hours, but even if they're staying late to play soccer on the field or something. So.
Great. Other questions for Mr. Larson? Okay, thank you.
The other information on this topic is, as Mr. Larson mentioned, the required crossings are all for elementary schools. The city does not provide crossing guards to middle schools and high schools, but there is one middle school that actually contracts and pays for crossing guards around their middle school campus. There are approximately 90 school crosswalks that have been identified as optional that don't currently have guards. So that gives you a sense of the magnitude. If the city were to staff all of the school optional crossing guards, it would be a doubling of the current number of locations.
And our annual contract, again, would be?
$110,000.
Okay. So if we were to double that, we could do potentially all of the crosswalks.
If we were able to hire everyone, that's one of the challenges is hiring the positions.
Which is a big part of the reason that we're going to the contract as well. So, okay.
And I don't know, the RFP went out with set criteria, given the criteria that we are currently at, and I don't know what that would do if we tried to increase that. So, I mean, we can ask what that would look like, and we'll try to get some additional information.
I would appreciate that. So, thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
is there a consideration for state-owned roads versus city roads? I know some of these on 7th East, for instance, is state-owned. I don't know the difference. We'd have to go through to talk about that.
John, is John still here?
Any sense on that at all?
Okay. Do we know, so is there, because I've had that same thought. Do we have a different requirement for a crossing guard on a state road versus a city road?
I'll have to look into that. I do know that there's different requirements for the actual, like the slow speed zone. But as far as, a crossing guard, as a city, if we're paying for it, I mean, really, we could put a crossing guard wherever we feel like they should be. So.
Okay.
Okay, because I think it would be crosswalk and a crossing guard question at a time. I'm thinking of Redwood Road as an example for us, but
Right.
didn't know if there's any more complications there we need to be aware of.
There are, if you want to designate it as an official school zone, like with the slower speeds. So we do have some on 7th and State, and I've been told that they've been grandfathered in, but there's some complications there, but we can work through those.
Okay.
Thanks.
John, not to, I know that with the contract that's out, we don't really know the answer to this, but if the city were to look at potentially funding all of the identified crosswalks, is that something that would be feasible from a transportation department, in your opinion?
Well, yeah, sure. If you're able to fund it, I think the challenge is hiring people. So we would just have to work through that. But that's from our perspective, will help create the priority list, and then work as far down that as you can, I guess.
Okay. And then, Ben's comment that it would roughly be a doubling of the current budget. Does that fit with your thought as well on the number of walks?
I don't think we can know that.
Okay.
I can't answer that.
Okay. All right. Other questions? Okay. Great. Ben?
The last update is related to arts maintenance funding. The council asked if there were any cost estimates for maintaining the city's existing art inventory and for information on that inventory. Attachment 4 provides a summary spreadsheet of the city-owned art. It is organized by city council district. It lists the artist, the year that it was required, the cost, and this is not the current appraised value, but the amount that it was estimated at when it was bought or when it was donated. The origin, how it was acquired, purchase, or donation are the most common. If there is a title or a description for the work, its current location, and then there's a column on the far right for additional notes. And attachment 5 is a study from 2013 of 111 artworks in this building, the city and county building, and Washington Square, the park around the building. Those two documents together have just over 270 individual works of art, and these range from a couple $100 for a nice print of an architectural drawing up to almost $2 million statue outside and everything in between. The value is just under $3.4 million for this building and this block, and $5.7 million for the other publicly owned art around the city. So the combined value of the two is $9.1 million. And I want to point out there are two different valuation methodologies that were used. The 2013 study looked at an appraisal. The summary spreadsheet, attachment 4, was what the original cost was, and so those are likely significantly lower than if you were to look at an appraisal or a replacement value in today's dollars. So 9.1 million is a conservative estimate for the 270 works that the city owns. And the number of works is expected to increase on the RDA side and on the city side. There's currently no ongoing funding for maintenance of these works of art. It's handled on a case-by-case basis. If a work of art is damaged here in the building, the facilities division will see if they have the funding to repair it that fiscal year. The administration is working on a potential maintenance fund using funding from the CIP 1% for art, and they indicated this might be coming to the council in a future budget amendment, but they're still working on the proposal. The 1% for art has a current balance of $716,000. And there's a policy question if the council's interested in talking about an assessment, updating the inventory and appraisals of the city's public works for art, what that might cost, or you could wait for the administration's proposal in a future budget amendment.
Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Fowler.
Thanks. I really appreciated this handout with the table and all the awesome public works of art that we have. I'm very competitive, and Fire Station 3 is listed in District 5, and it's actually in District 7, so that needs to be fixed. And but we had this discussion during this budget amendment of adding a 0.5% to our 1% for public art. And I think that as the administration, I would ask the administration, as you're coming up with that proposal, sort of how it looks that we could use kind of that extra 0.5% in some aspect to continue adding to the maintenance fund, because these really are valuable pieces to our communities and throughout our communities. So I would hate to have, building maintenance be like, man, that was a really cool piece of art and we don't have any money to fix it, so we're gonna just put it in the fleet block for like the Hoberman Arch and people can take pieces of it, right? Like, I think that we really do need a proposal for how we're gonna continue maintaining these unique pieces of art throughout our communities. I really just wanted to complain that was not, and then I had to come up with something legitimate.
Other questions or comments about the art?
I have a question about this assessment. So if we went with an assessment of, you should said that we might be able to do another assessment of would that cost money as well? Would that assessment come out of this funds that we have?
It would certainly cost money to pay for the assessment. I'm not sure how much the last one cost in 2013, but if you're interested, we can ask the administration for cost estimates.
That would be great. Or even, there are a lot of art groups out there that advocate for, to us about funding public art. And I think it would be a good idea as to maybe a matching type of arrangement where they can help us with this assessment as we fund some of the maintenance funds and then the arts funds. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Thanks.
Okay.
And just a reminder, the budget amendment as it is currently prepared will have a one-time increase to 1.5% for the percent for art budget. And it currently wouldn't be allowed to be used for maintenance. It would require an ordinance change to expand that usage, as well as to make it an ongoing 1.5%. As it currently stands, this is just a one-time increase to 1.5% this fiscal year.
Okay.
To add it to fund new art,
That is correct.
right? And what she said and what Andrew said last meeting, that 0.5% that we wanted to add it to the maintenance fund
There is no maintenance
Okay,
fund for the
for the-
art.
one.
To create one, it would be an ordinance amendment as well. This is adding a 0.5% for new art. So if the council doesn't want to go that direction, you don't have to approve it in this budget amendment.
Councilmember Wharton.
So why wouldn't we, I thought the percent was supposed to be for new art, and then we were adding the 0.5% as the maintenance piece.
That's not what's currently in the budget amendment, and the percent for art is set in ordinance. And the ordinance says that it's for adding art features to new capital projects.
Right, so that would be new art, right?
That's just at the 1%.
Correct. If you're adding an additional 0.5% on top of that,
Yeah.
into the percent for art fund, that percent for art fund is governed by the city ordinance that says it can be used for the capital projects adding art features to them.
Oh,
Yeah.
So if you wanted to set it
Yes, so-
aside separately, instead of increasing to 1.5%, you could add this funding for art maintenance in a separate account.
Okay, I think that's where the confusion was, because, I do recall that conversation that we wanted to keep 1% for new art. The 0.5% increase would be for the maintenance, but if we need to move that 0.5% out of that and put it somewhere else, can we still, obviously we can still do that.
You
but
can certainly do that.
Just let me just check with the council. Is that is that your intent as well?
No, I think my intent was to keep it in the new art one and ask the administration about the maintenance side of it, because we can't, like you said, we can't do it for that. But if the administration has ideas about what we could do for the maintenance piece, I'd like to hear that. My intent was to keep it in the new.
To do the full 1.5%
Yeah,
for new?
I understand the maintenance needs, but I haven't heard from the administration yet about ideas about that piece, because it's a whole different discussion about maintaining things or replacing. Because some things you'd have to replace, some things to maintain is a whole different discussion about how much that costs, how often, there's a ton of things like that.
Okay. Well, Councilmember Wharton and then Councilmember Fowler.
just one follow-up question. On the maintenance for art, there hasn't been like any damaged art that prompted this discussion, has there?
No, the discussion started in CIP earlier this summer about increasing the 1% to 1.5%, and now the maintenance piece has shifted the discussion.
Okay.
But there has been, I know that, so just to Amy, since Amy brought it up, there, in District 6, there are 3 different projects that are actually in District 3. But one of the art installations in District 6 was vandalized. It was a bronze of quail, and someone stole some of the baby quail, and they had to make those again. So, I think it is something that we deal with. Fortunately, not a lot, but sometimes. So, Councilmember Fowler.
Yeah, this is actually a question to you, Andrew. Was there an intent, was there a reason to add the 0.5%? Like, was there a project that we were considering? Because I sort of remember the conversation happening, but then in my head, I turned it into a maintenance conversation, because apparently that's what I do all the time now. Will you sort of remind me what that original intent for adding that one-time 0.5% was?
Well, the one time was one time. I think.
Realize the words one time.
Exactly. My intent actually is to look at the ordinance going forward to increase our art period as we build more in the city, because we're in a huge building boom. This was just a precursor for that discussion to change the ordinance to increase it to 1.5. But this, I can't remember now. Yeah, so this 0.5, if we designate it into the art fund, it would act the same way it would. But yeah, this was a precursor to that discussion for me.
I mean, I would be supportive of increasing the 1.5 and then coming back to a broader ordinance discussion about keeping it at 1.5 for the future and adding the ability to use a percentage of that or some sort of amount of that to fund an ongoing maintenance fund.
Yeah, as a one-time thing, it wouldn't go forward exactly, and so it's not like we're bound next year to continue doing this. It would open a discussion about the maintenance and the ongoing increase, so.
Okay. And Cindy?
Just following up on what both council members have said, I think the administration has looked at this from different perspectives too at different times based on what they've asked us. And so really all of the things that you're suggesting are needs. You could right now just do one thing or the other, knowing that very soon you'll have an opportunity to address it more comprehensively. So you can just increase the percentage or do the 0.5 for maintenance. And another thing that could happen is when you look at this ordinance, right now, the definition over the years of which projects the percent for art applies to has been narrowed because, frankly, just budget constraints. Like roads don't, it doesn't apply to roads. There are various things that it doesn't apply to. So you could be more specific in the ordinance about defining that. You could set up a separate maintenance fund. It looks like, I don't know if the administration has decided which department would be in charge of maintenance. Would it be public services? Would it be economic development, arts council? So sounds like this is a preliminary conversation where you can appropriate some money and ask for more feedback.
Other questions or comments about art? Okay, Ben?
That was the last update. The public hearing for the budget amendment is tonight, and you're scheduled to vote on October 8th.
Okay, great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
All right, our next item is number 4 on our agenda, the Three Creeks Confluence Interlocal Agreement with Salt Lake County for Tourism, Recreation, Culture, and Conventions Funding. Ben is going to stay at the table, and then Noel is joining us. Is Corey planning on coming
Corey had to leave this afternoon, so
Okay.
I'm filling in for him.
All right. So Ben, it's all you.
This is the first briefing. No public hearing is required, and you're scheduled to take potential action on October 8th. This is a request for the council to approve a resolution. It would authorize the administration to enter into an interlocal agreement for reimbursement of up to $606,798 of construction costs related to building a new park, the Three Creeks Confluence Park. This is just off 9th West, where 1300 South dead ends at the Jordan River, where 3 of the 7 creeks converge into the Jordan River. And up on the big screen, you have likely seen this in CIP and CDBG over the years. This is the concept, and it currently, this is from 2 years ago, and down here in the lower right, this auto shop. In CIP, you recently funded $500,000 to purchase this property, and it would be added into the park project. So it is a larger park footprint than what is currently shown here. The TRCC, it means Tourism, Recreation, Culture, and Conventions Funding. It comes from car rental, restaurant, and transient room taxes, and the revenue is administered by Salt Lake County. Municipalities can submit their capital projects to the TRCC Advisory Committee. It's composed of 5 mayors within the county and 4 residents that live within the county. They make a set of funding recommendations, which then go to the county council, and the county council then makes a determination on which projects to fund. It's similar to the city's CIP process. This project received a
So,
full...
Mr. Chair, Ben, there's currently 5 mayors, you said, that sit on that?
That's my understanding.
Any idea who are those mayors from which?
I don't know. Can find out.
And then kind of, how does that work with the city? How do we go through that process, Noel, that we submit applications for TRCC money?
The application process becomes available in the early summertime, and Public Services, we've been trying to be fairly aggressive with the TRC funding recently. We made an application again for this year to do some improvements at the ballpark. And so we've gone through that process, and that application process is then we take it to the mayor for her support and endorsement and prepare that, and then we submit that application. And then we make those presentations at that. So it's sort of self-driven. Public Services has been doing that, but that doesn't mean that other work groups within the city couldn't also.
So currently, it just goes through Public Services. Public Services decides which ones they want to apply for. Then you guys start the application process, give it to the mayor. Mayor decides if that's the projects that she would like to see move forward, and the applications are sent on.
That's right. And then we go and make a presentation to the TRCC board, and we've been fortunate. We made some application as part of the Sorensen project, Sorensen remodel work, and that was the first time the city had made application for those TRCC funds. We felt that Salt Lake City puts a significant contribution towards that pot of money, and so we've been trying every year now to make a request and be proactive in requesting those funds.
And for me, I think I love the idea of getting more community involvement, whether that's, another board or whatever it is looking forward, whether it's CDBG or CIP, the same process. I just think being on top of those projects and being able to apply for them, that's pretty much free money that we can get, right?
Yeah, I mean, and when you look at where the money comes from, a lot of that money is sourced out of Salt Lake City, so
right.
We feel it's important to ask.
Thank you for walking me through that.
Yep.
Councilmember Fowler?
Is there a way to kind of maybe flag projects that would qualify for TRCC money and then, kind of start, we all have connections at the county or things that we can maybe do to say, is this a good project to reach out to somebody at the county and say, would this be a good project for TRCC money? And not just with Public Services, but with parks and with, I know there's some other avenues. Is there a way that we can maybe start monitoring the projects we have in our queue? Because I know there's roughly 7 million of them, and see how we can start utilizing and really capitalizing on those applications and some of that TRCC money. I mean, I don't want to add extra work to you.
No, I think that this being our third time through the process, I think we're starting to figure out the groove of that a little better. So I think we could be more deliberative. One of the things that we're finding is it's best to sort of ask for one,
right,
versus kind of shotgun a bunch of small things. And so I think that we absolutely could have that conversation, but I think it needs to be sort of strategic and targeted.
Okay, great, thank you.
David Litvak?
Councilmember Fowler, Mr. Chair, I appreciate the chance to respond to Councilmember Fowler's comment. I think that's very much in line with what the administration is trying to do the last couple of years. We've tried to create some opportunities and work with Public Services and other departments to identify one or two possible projects to apply for. So we're not taking a shotgun approach and just that we're being strategic, knowing that we could get a couple projects funded. And so I think there is opportunity for the administration and the council to work together to identify what those projects could be and how we can strategically apply for them.
Great, thank you. Other questions or comments about this? Ben?
If council members are interested, attachment 3 has the county's program guidelines and policies. So it provides a little more detail on what the county is looking for in projects and what kind of community and public benefits they're prioritizing. The table on the big screen is a summary of the Three Creeks Confluence funding sources. There are 3 phases. The first one was design, public input meetings, and creation of bilingual materials, primarily in Spanish and English. That was funded through CDBG in 2015. The council then made several appropriations for Phase 2, which is building the park itself. And these were made in 2016, 2017, and then in 2018. And this included expansion of the project from the original concept to also include amenities like a fishing pier, a bridge over the Jordan River, a plaza, as well as an enhanced pedestrian crosswalk over 9th West, so it's easier to get there from the neighbors on the east side of the river. And then, as mentioned earlier, $500,000 to purchase the adjacent auto shop was done in CIP this year. The full funding that's been approved by the council is just over $2.9 million. This fully funded all 3 of the construction phases. This additional $606,000, some of it may be needed for additional cost increases, but it's also possible that this would now have more funding than needed for the project. So some of the already appropriated funds may not be needed and could go back to CIP for other uses. There's a couple policy questions if the council is interested in asking the administration about the reimbursement deadline. October 31st of this year is the deadline to submit invoices for the construction expenses. That seems like a bit of an aggressive deadline. There's also questions about if there are future plans for this park, such as building the Nature Conservancy, and if future requests for funding are expected to come to the council.
Any questions there?
Number two is a question about the reimbursement deadline.
I can say that on the reimbursement, we can file for extensions on that, and we're working with the county on that. The reimbursement process for the county is a new process. It had been up to a couple years ago. They were giving out lump sums, and now it says reimbursement. So we've just tried to maintain. They give us a contact person to work with, and we just try to maintain that relationship and then make a request as we move forward. And then we try to do incremental billings when possible towards design or any other costs that we have in that to kind of keep that going so that we're not looking for a full reimbursement at the tail of the project.
So do we have an estimated start date at least? Because right now nothing started, I believe, on.
And the notes that I have from Parks is that that we've got the complete construction documents and design were done in 2019, and we're looking for implementation fall of 2019 through summer 20.
Okay.
So we're hoping to get rolling.
If it'd be helpful, we can ask the administration to confirm when the extension is approved from the county.
Sure.
That'd be helpful, yeah. Thanks.
Building on that, and then also on what Councilmember Rogers spoke about earlier, one of the things that I would really like to see, not only for this project, but other future open space projects that we look at creating in the city, is more of an operational partnership with, or a potential operational partnership with other community entities. I think that, one of the things that we struggle with regularly in the city is just how to maintain our open space and dealing with those ongoing costs once we make an expenditure like park or open space. And so I would just strongly encourage the administration to look at that and figure out, whether it is with the Nature Conservancy, whether it's with, another organization that could help to manage these assets. Now's probably the best time to do that while things are, before things are built and operational. And that's something that I would really like to see moving forward as we're looking to acquire or to develop new open space. Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you. Ben, thank you. The next item on our agenda, we will jump over the 21st South temporary closure. We'll come back to that. Let's move to the Salt Lake City Sales and Excise Tax Revenue Refunding Bond Series 2019. Kira is our policy analyst on this, and then Marina Scott is our city treasurer, and Boyd, where's Boyd? Boyd, there you are, Boyd, is here if we need you. So, all right, Kira.
I'll just quickly orient us and then hand it over to the expert. This is a pair of resolutions for the council to consider. The RDA board will also hear more on their piece of that at the next RDA meeting. Today, you've got the Salt Lake City Sales and Excise Tax Revenue Refunding Bonds the two resolutions that the council is considering. One is for the two bonds that the city is refunding, for 2007 for the Grant Tower project and 2013 for the Performing Arts Center. They're being recommended together. Those are estimated to save approximately $35,000 a year over the remaining life of the bonds. And then the RDA refunding component, the council is also being asked to consider a resolution that would authorize the RDA to perform their piece of that. And then that's the Performing Arts. I'm sorry, I'm skipping all over the place. So there are several bonds. There are two resolutions. One resolution is authorizing the refunding of the 2007 and 2013 bonds. Those together would save $361,000 annually over the remaining life of the bonds. The second resolution would authorize the RDA to perform their piece.
Okay.
And with that, I'll leave the rest to Marina.
Thank you.
I will clarify just a few things.
Okay.
So the administration is presenting two bond resolutions. The first resolution is proposing to refund two outstanding city bonds, sales tax 2007A and 2013A. 2007A was issued for two projects, Grand Tower and the Tracks Extension project back in 2007. The RDA contributes a portion of the debt service on this bond and will be bringing to the board an interlocal agreement that will need to be amended to reflect their new debt service if the sales tax refunding is successful. Sales tax 2013A was issued to finance Eccles Theater, and if this refunding is successful, the city could expect approximately $326,000 in annual savings. The RDA is responsible for the debt service on the sales tax bond, and they will be also bringing an interlocal agreement to the RDA board that will need to be amended to reflect the new debt service if the sales tax refunding is successful. So all the savings are estimates, and they depend on the market conditions. In 2013, two different bonds were issued to finance Eccles Theater. The city issued sales tax bond, and the RDA issued a tax increment bond, which brings us to the second resolution. As a part of this refunding process, the city council will need to consider a resolution that approves the refunding of the tax increment bond by the RDA. This resolution also authorizes a new annual contribution agreement between Salt Lake City and the RDA, which states that in case the RDA is not able to make a debt service payment, the city will consider an appropriation to the RDA. And if approved, the current plan calls for the refunding bonds, sales tax refunding bonds, to be sold on November 19th.
Okay.
That's all I have.
Great. So with that, I think we have, everyone here has about 3 questions that, oh wait, never mind. But Councilmember Rogers does.
Yeah, I just have a question. This is a no-brainer that we're going to redo this. So, I mean, for the next 19 years, we're going to be saving $326,000 annually on one of these.
Right.
And the other one comes mature at 2026 for $35,000 annually savings. Okay,
Yeah.
James, some of us might disagree with you.
okay.
Okay. Councilmember Johnston wants to continue to pay more money.
Somebody out there needs some money badly.
Marina, thank you for your office's diligence and looking at managing taxpayer funds. Councilmember Rogers is right on this. I mean, it really is a no-brainer, but it seems like that to us because we didn't figure it out, because that's not what we do. You, however, figured it out because it is what you do. So thank you very much for that, and we really appreciate you and your office's work, not just on these items, but on every other funding item where you're looking at saving taxpayer money. So
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right. Let's now move to item number 8, which is an initial discussion of legislative intents for fiscal year 2019-2020. This is a follow-up, this is the first of our 3 planned briefings on this item. And so today, what I want to do is get through all of these. This is not the time to explain or re-explain why we made these legislative or added these legislative intents in the budget. It's more to figure out. Hold on, just one sec. No. So we will we'll move forward with this discussion about these legislative intents. But today, for the first of these briefings, it's just to hear from the different administrative departments how those legislative intents are being dealt with. Make sense? Okay. So Allison Rowland is on her way in. Hi, Allison.
Hello, were you looking for me?
We're looking for you.
I
So,
apologize for the delay.
no, you're good. So, just explain. This is the first of the 3 briefings today. We just want to hear from you and how these legislative intents are being dealt with, and then we'll go from there.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. As it sounds like you already mentioned, this is the first of 3 briefings planned for the legislative intents for FY20. Later on in the year, there are also written reviews of previous year's legislative intents, which were not closed out by the council in the most recent budget session. The idea of this first discussion is to exchange preliminary information and clarify the new legislative intents. We understand that at many times in the rush of the budget, administration officials are not necessarily able to inform us of all the information they may already have on a given topic, or they may be already working on a topic. And so we want to make sure, on the one hand, that council members have the information needed from the administration, and on the other hand, that the council has the opportunity to perhaps modify is the word I'm looking for, modify or change certain wording in legislative intents depending on what they learn today. And in case, even if the chair has mentioned it, I will reiterate that the intention today is not to solve any of the issues related to a particular legislative intent. This is really just a discussion about how the council prefers and what the council prefers that the administration do in response to the legislative intents. As you may have already mentioned, the second legislative intent update will be will coincide. I can find words. Sorry. It will coincide with Budget Amendment 3 or 4, and the third round is typically part of the annual budget. So those are written responses in both cases, although the council may request additional information. Yes. I'm just going to pull up the list of legislative intents, and I don't know, Mr. Chair, how you'd like to proceed.
Yeah, what we can do is we can just go down let's just go down the list. We have 12 legislative intents that we added to this year's budget. And let's just go through each of those. The first is the Park Ranger program.
Yes, so the intent, as we understand it, is of this intent is to address the overall goal of increasing the perception of safety in parks, and in addition, address the concern that some council members raised that uniformed police officers could cause fear or uncertainty among some members of the public. Our understanding so far is that the police department has plans to have 1 sergeant and 5 officers working in parks. The main focus of the parks would be the main parks that would be focused on would be Fairmount, Sugar House, Liberty, Pioneer, and Jordan Park, and those are determined principally on the size and amount of use that each of these parks gets. We also understand that the State Department of Natural Resources provides grants to help patrol the Jordan River Parkway, and that the police department would continue to use those for that purpose. If there are questions, or if anyone from the administration, including Randy, has something to say on this, it might be a good time.
Randy?
I unfortunately, I don't have anything to say.
Okay.
I invited everyone to be here at 4:45.
Yeah.
And I'm not seeing as many people here as I'd hope there would be. I just sent an email asking everyone to come as quickly as they can,
Right.
if possible. I unfortunately can't respond to this in any way.
Okay.
Any knowledge.
Councilmember Johnston?
That's fine. I understand. We're very, very efficient. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the police department's done a nice job of outreaching to West Side residents, particularly Hispanic and other minority populations. So I appreciate their work on that piece of it. My concern is about implementation timeline. It sounds like it might be delayed unless this becomes prioritized in a budget amendment or some funds are moved around. I just want to confirm that with the administration, perhaps, about what would happen to make sure this happens sooner than later this year.
And it looks like David Litvack is coming up for the administration to respond to this question.
All right, David Litvack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So in the budget, the funding for the new officers, the 6 plus the additional, I think it was 23 or 27 total, does not become available until October. So we are working on a bridge plan with public safety in the parks, and that's most likely going to be driven by the same strategy that we've been using over this last year with using overtime for officers in some of the hotspot parks. So there is a delay just in terms of when the funding begins and the hiring and the training of the new officers that will make up this park patrol. So we are figuring out a plan so that we can start addressing that right now.
Yeah, I was just wondering because it's probably most needed before the snows fall, so between now and, say, November, depending on when that happens. If there's a plan for that immediately before wintertime, and then we can look at, obviously, next year's different.
Yeah, and we do plan on addressing some of that through the budget amendment, but also seeing what we can get started right away.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yeah, Mr. Litvack, I know that I was briefed by the police department. They're looking at doing some things, and I'm wondering if, when it's appropriate, that they could come and address us on that, because I know in order to fill the Park Ranger program, they were looking at doing some things in order to staff that.
Absolutely.
And
yeah, I'm sure they'd be happy to.
And to follow up on that, is that still the intent or one of the intents of the reorganization that the police department's looking at right now to deal with this?
The
or
intent,
to help deal with it?
Well, the intent is the same as it was when we discussed during the budget to do the patrol while we work on with the council on the intent language or the language in the intent. But as I mentioned, using those overtime officers now as a short term. We've also, the police department has also made some adjustments recently around some of the hot spots like Liberty Park when having like the graveyard shift, going out and helping empty out the park of everyone at curfew, as well as checking on some of the restrooms. And they're working with public services to make sure that we're providing that safety both to the public and park employees. But I'm sure they'd really appreciate the opportunity. And it would probably be good to have parks, public services and the police department together discuss that.
Great.
I just got an email that Chief Doubt and Shelley Dietrich are on their way. So if you want to
Yeah, so we
circle
can,
back to this, we can.
sure, if there are other questions, we can definitely come back when they get here. Cindy?
Maybe this is out of order, but one of the things, I mean, the obvious answer, the only way that the administration could make this more robust is over time, because they can't suddenly create a qualified class. The council's been very supportive of that concept. I wonder if it would be appropriate for you to take a straw poll saying that you're supportive of that concept, so that you guys would know either way, are they supportive of that concept or not? Does that have any value?
Yeah? Councilmember Rogers, do you want to make a straw poll or suggest it?
Suggest the straw poll that it is our intent to, how would we phrase that,
Yeah,
Cindy?
That you are interested and supportive of entertaining a proposal to add police budget, add to police overtime for the purpose of patrolling parks, and you're giving a courtesy advance information to the mayor as to that support.
That's my motion.
Okay, is that clear with everybody? Okay, thumbs up that we support that, thumbs down.
Straw
that
poll,
we
I
do
should
not,
say.
then straw poll. That is unanimous, with Councilmember Mendenhall being absent. Great. Okay, let's move to the next one, funding our future new sales tax. David, if you don't mind, you might just want to
I'm more than happy
hang
to.
out here for a bit. So number 2 is funding our future new sales tax funds for public safety.
So I believe this is a repeated intent from the previous year, and the request is that the fire department and 911 dispatch be included in the funding for funding our future revenue in the future.
Great. And I know that, as a council, we've talked about that. We have straw polled, we've added that to the budget. How is that moving forward, David?
I don't know, but what I would say is, based on the timing of that, I think you will see more about that with the new administration, because that is something that typically comes up within the budget. And so with the new administration, it'd be good with the new administration to check in with the new administration on that intent language as they begin the budget process in February. Typically with the mayor's office,
Okay.
when the administration, when that starts. But that is something that you would typically see come to fruition within the budget process.
Great, thank you. Any additional questions on this one? Okay, number 3, green team metrics.
Yes, so the idea of this is it's based on a request from the budget discussions, during the budget discussions, where the council requested that the administration track tangible improvements in job-related skills among participants of the Green Team Farm Project. There was in the original recommended budget, there was a idea of cutting $50,000 from the budget of this program, and the council decided instead to restore that funding and to request that these metrics be tracked.
Okay, any questions on this one? Councilmember Johnston.
Not a question. I just want to be, I guess the discussion's going to be more clear going forward about why fund this versus other programs that may have similar concepts. I like the program, but I also wonder if we are trying to find the metric to sort of validate it versus set out the metrics we're looking for in a program and then show efficacy. Does that make sense? I think it's a discussion that we're going to have as a council going forward about ensuring how we how we evaluate programs. If we like them, I understand we can find metrics, but I think we might be wading into some other waters here. So,
okay. Yeah. Councilmember Valdemoros.
I agree with Andrew. I think sometimes it's hard to, for nonprofits overall, when you have a social goal, to have very tangible clear successes and outcomes to present, because they might measure that in different ways that it might not make sense in our heads. Like maybe their intent was to help 15 people, but they were only able to help 5 because the other 10 at some, follow through the cracks, something happened. And so all we're gonna look at is, oh, they were only able to help 5 when they said it was 15. So, and that's not fair in a way, I feel like, because they have, other ways of outcomes and successes. So yes, we need to talk amongst us, what are those tangible and what are those things that we're going to be okay with, a little bit lenient as a successful outcome.
You have to remind me, was this part of our homeless funding? It was. And I think one of the ideas that came forward, I want to say it was this fiscal year, this past budget cycle, was taking our homeless funding, the $2 million or so we did per year, and targeting it to determine gaps or particular needs in the system. Is that still the intent? Because in the past we've done a lot of filling emergency needs, like at the Wiegand Center or emergency shelter or things like that came up during the year. And I think, if I remember right, we're trying to take a proactive approach to figure out where in the county city system that we needed to target these funds. Is that accurate?
I think that's more accurate about the housing dollars.
About the housing
the funding
dollars.
Our future housing dollars, the program dollars, and putting out to help fill the gaps in terms of the housing. If I could just say, Mr. Chair, knowing that HAND manages this contract, I could almost guarantee you that this is probably under progress already. But I wanted to bring some context. So when the mayor proposed the budget, we did propose a reduction in the amount. And part of the challenge that I think that we're trying to get at with this intent language is the green team has always been discussed as a employment job skill enhancer. And we haven't seen good metrics or good outcomes on that line. But there may be other metrics that are broader in terms of job skills rather than just connection to another employment that the council asked us to explore a little bit further. It help us make that decision whether this is something to continue to fund in the future, if that makes sense.
I think from my end, I would advocate that based on the restructuring of homeless services in the county through the coalition and the state having to have a more coherent, clear plan about the outcomes they want, we may have the opportunity to take a look at those and see where gaps are and then target our money based on needs in the city that aren't being addressed elsewhere. That might narrow it down. I like that idea going forward, following that policy, but I think there's some work to be done there. So, and there's a new administration, obviously, so. But I would advocate for that going forward.
Okay.
And that could also be very well timed with the consolidated plan, the 5 years on the consolidated plan that we're doing as well.
Okay. Cindy?
So this is a really good example of why it's good to have these conversations with you guys at this time, because you've had some time to think through what you'd like to see coming back. On this one, I think it'll be, if I were in the administration, it would be hard for me to know what to do, whether to try to model something for this money after what they've done with the housing money, where they put it through a process and ask for people's feedback on what the needs are, as Councilmember Johnston was describing, or whether they look at the overall metrics to see which ones apply in this case, or whether they attempt to do metrics relating to this issue. Hopefully, because the issues come up so much, the provider is already looking at metrics that they could recommend. But can you just talk a little bit more about what you're expecting, or maybe ask the administration for their recommendation? They could come back another day.
Councilmember Johnston.
I think if this is an example of the green team, I think it was framed as an employment service. If employment is one of the gaps that we thought we could fill as a city, it makes some sense to say, I want to look at employment programs, and here's an example of one. Let's try this out as even a pilot. I think that's the discussion I'd like to sort of have about, are we going to take some pilot programs over a variety of things like employment or housing or other things, or are we going to look at the system and say, we are going to have other partners do employment, we're going to focus our efforts on housing or stuff. I'm thinking about emergency overflow shelter, housing stuff, outreach, things like that that maybe affect the city in those kind of concrete ways versus maybe employment programs, which are great, but we may need to focus our efforts on some core things. That's the discussion I'm thinking maybe we should have. That's where I was going with my comments.
Okay. And I think that makes sense. And I do think that with better metrics from the Green Team, we'll be able to it'll be easier for us to make those decisions because right now we're just kind of spitballing as to where things are going and what's happening. I do think that there's a second issue that was actually the original intent of Green Team, which was cleaning up some of the problematic spots that were frequent issues in the downtown Rio Grande area.
This is actually referring to the gardening program in particular?
This is the gardening, not the clean team. There's the green team. Okay.
Yeah.
Brian.
We're going to come up with a third team. We're
Yeah,
the green
so this
team,
is the
clean
green team, clean team, and the, okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think with that, those metrics will help.
It may be interesting because this also used an existing vacant RDA property, which is improvement for the neighborhood and helped in some other ways. It wasn't just employment. So there may be some discussion about if you can hit multiple needs we have, but I think from my perspective, we may want to think about areas in which we can make a big impact and areas which other entities like State Department of Workforce Services, county services could make an impact probably above and beyond what we could do. I'm not saying we don't do the Green Team, but we may need to look at it more coherently than just an employment program.
Sure. Councilmember Valdemoros.
I understand what Andrew was saying, but at the same time, this program is only $50,000. So it's not that we're granting $500,000 to create employment, and we're only seeing 2 successful cases. I mean, this is only $50,000. And
Councilmember, sorry to interrupt. It's actually more than $50,000. This was a proposed cut in one position of the garden, so it was a manager position that was proposed to be cut. Sorry to interrupt.
So sorry, and so what's the number? Because I think that's makes up.
Yeah, we think maybe 150,000.
Okay.
So 3 times more.
3 times more. Still, it's not $500,000. So I think. Yes, Andrew, but I think we need to have clearer outcomes and what the gap is, and also keep in mind that these numbers are not huge, and we might be making a bigger impact. Maybe not directly, but maybe it is indirectly, and that's what we need to be looking at as well.
Councilmember Rogers.
Yeah, so I guess my question is, with the metrics on the Green Team, I know that Wasatch Community Gardens is already doing that. Is there a way that we could look at not reinventing the wheel and being able to work, hand in glove with them?
So they're actually one of the partners on it. So they help run the program, and some of the positions that we're funding is with Wasatch Community Gardens. So yes, you're absolutely correct.
Okay, and by doing that, are they looking at expanding it with Wasatch Community Gardens? Because I know there's more than one group. So I don't know. I guess that's my question. Are there too many?
I don't know about the expansion question, but we can definitely find out.
All right.
Okay, other questions about or comments about Green Team?
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
is the thought that the administration should continue to work on this, get some responses, as David indicated, and then get back to the council? Okay, thank you.
The next one is the sustainability rate increase.
Yes, the council requested that the administration conduct public engagement on various options for a waste collection rate increase. We know that this public engagement is being planned at this point, and I believe several council members have been able to meet in small group meetings with the sustainability department. That's about all I know. They are available for additional meetings if any of the council members are interested.
Do we know when? So just a time frame. I mean, when are they planning on?
I believe they're beginning this fall with some of their engagement actions, including a survey for rate users. But you could get more information if someone from sustainability
Yeah,
is
and I've met with them. I just wanted to be cleared, that it is started. That they're planning on starting fairly soon. Cindy? Yes.
Just one additional piece is that we are seeing more success that people are having when they do have a need to have yard waste hauled away. Call to Haul took some, like 4 cans out to a constituent the other day. They are offering cans to people. So for a while, we were getting complaints that people were getting no service in that regard except an offer of a can. But it does seem like they are more consciously addressing that in this interim period.
Great. Other questions about the rate increase, public outreach, or public engagement? Okay. Complete streets definition number 5.
Yes, last year, at the end of last year, the council requested suggestions from the administration to make improvements in the code related to complete streets, and these included additional opportunities to include pedestrian and neighborhood safety. So I guess the question for the council is whether they'd like to hear more from the Streets Division or other, or the administration in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think, one question that I would have is just, where are we, or how soon could we hear what work has been done, or, on updating that definition? Doesn't need to happen right now, but, I think just knowing that that's happening. Jennifer McGrath?
Sorry, John Larson had to step out for something that was scheduled when the schedule was different.
Yeah,
He'll
no
be
worries.
back soon. He can add. But essentially, we are deep into our typologies study, and we are planning on that work that comes out of that informing our proposal that will come to you for a new ordinance for complete streets. I believe that we've continued to invite council to participate in those. There'll be plenty of opportunities for you guys to continue to do that through the course of the project. Again, John can probably give you a better timeline than I can on that. But we specifically wrote into the scope of that work to make sure that we got all of the information that we would need to be able to build a platform for rewriting the Complete Streets Ordinance.
Great.
Thanks.
Questions or comments about that? You did a great job answering for him. So, all right, number 6, golf food and beverage options.
Yes, so the intention of the council here was to ask the administration to look at the open space zone ordinance with the goal of removing barriers to providing flexible food and beverage options in golf courses.
And no?
Okay, so open space zoning and golf and restaurants and services. So I chatted with the planning department, and we talked a little bit through what it would be like for us to do sort of additional facilities or things of that sort in the golf and within the open space. Generally feeling, as long as it's sort of within that clubhouse, not a standalone commercial structure, because we have specific rules about commercial structures within open space, we can be very open to the public, and we can market and do some of those things, I think, to be more attractive. The hitch comes when you try to do something that's a little bit more standalone. What we wanted to look at next was sort of the services that were there. The alcohol licensing for our golf courses comes from the contracted service provider. Salt Lake City does not hold the alcohol license, and so we make that a request as a part of the RFP for that service that we do. And I think that maybe we could look at future RFPs being a little bit more prescriptive or descriptive about what we are wanting to see there. The next piece that we felt like we kind of cleared that hurdle a little bit. The next hurdle is if we're looking at trying to make those spaces a little more inviting for other users, neighborhoods and such. And we want to maybe attract, you know, a more local feel or something that's a little bit fancier than what we're currently experiencing. We need to consider some of the tenant improvements within that. You know, how do we encourage someone to make an investment in that place? Because that is an investment. And traditionally with RFPs, we haven't sort of incorporated sort of any tenant improvement support with that. And so I feel like that's sort of the next place we need to start making some investigation is to what is that, you know, tenant improvement. Is it something we bring to the table, or if we want them to bring something to the table? Our contracts for concessions have been shorter in term. If we're wanting them to bring more to the table, then maybe we need to start looking at terms. But I feel like that's sort of the next place that we really need to do more digging. But I think that our ability to market, our ability to attract people, I think within our RFPs and within our ordinances, we feel fairly comfortable with that. And I've talked with Matt and Kelsey, and we're going to work with our concessions to now kind of start working towards doing a little more social media promotion around the concessions that we have. And Lisa and I are going around and having lunches at all the golf courses now. So maybe you guys could too go to your golf courses and have some lunches and see, you know, and bring some of that back to the conversation, because I think that would be really helpful, right? Like what would make this some place that I would want to go for lunch, dinner, breakfast, whatever.
Great. Thank you, Noel.
No, let me know when you're at Forestdale. I'll join you guys for lunch.
Okay.
Councilmember Valdemoros.
So we are able to do restaurants and alcohol sales within the existing clubhouse.
That's right.
Okay, can we expand our clubhouse, meaning construct? Okay, so that would be okay, so we're good on that one. Okay, right. So second thing, the goal, I think, of having these sales or restaurants or whatever was, in my mind, I think in our conversations before, it was to kind of offset the cost that these golf courses bring to us every year that we have to pay for. And I also remember saying we might have to be looking at some little bit of investment, remember, on our part, meaning TI improvements, so that we can actually start generating, not everything, but a little bit of cash flow back to this operational cost that we have going on. So with that said, I think this is a good idea, and I would be interested in looking at making some more investments and improvements of this.
And I just point maybe one improvement that's been made, and Forestdale is a good example. We put that big concrete patio out front there, and I would argue it's one of the nicest patios in Salt Lake City, right? If you're going someplace for lunch, that Forestdale patio is an amazing place to go have lunch. The views there, the park, the mountains, everything, it's great.
Great. Questions, additional questions or comments about this one? Okay. Number 7, the Fire Department Medical Response Team.
This is another repeat from last year. The council requested that the administration continue to evaluate call volume to determine the cost and benefits of potentially adding another medical response team for other parts of the city. My guess is that the fire department continues to trace the same metrics they did before, but I don't know if there are additional questions.
They are actively tracking that. They just gave us a little heads up to say, still ongoing, nothing new.
Questions or comments on this? Okay, number 8, police uniform allowance.
So the council requested that from the outset of the next MOU process with the City Police Association, the administration would include discussion of the uniform allowance with the intent to make it more competitive with other agencies. My understanding is that the uniform allowance is something that applies only to a fraction of the total police force, but there may be people here who can speak more informedly about this issue.
Okay. Do any of you have questions, like more specific questions about this? Okay. Number 9, economic development position.
Yes, during the budget, the council discussed the possibility of what a new staff person in economic development might be able to achieve for the department, and finally decided that what they would do is allocate an additional $110,000 in funding, and that the Department of Economic Development would be able to use that funding as needed for a position that they decide themselves, and that any of this funding that wasn't used for the new position would be either recaptured or fall to fund balance.
Okay. Questions on the economic, Councilmember Valdemoros?
Any news from the administration on where we are at with this?
Hi, Ben Collender from Economic Development. We have, as many council members know, recently lost Laura Fritz, who was involved in taking the lead on this, but we are internally going through a process now to identify the best placement of this resource because we have a couple of needs. So we hope to have something in the next month or so approved by the administration.
That would be awesome.
Great.
Next month.
All right. Number 10, funding our future housing program outcome report.
The council here requested that the administration provide a written report on housing program outcomes and metrics from the FY20 funding in time for the FY21 budget discussions.
Questions? Okay. Number 11, funding our future affordable housing allocation.
This is one that the council requested for future consideration, essentially that the city evaluate the impact that the infusion of the 10% tax differential from the Northwest Quadrant / Inland Port Authority will have on the city's ability to fund housing programs.
Okay. All right. And the last one, number 12, funding our future unspent funds.
And this is simply that the intent of the council would be that any funds allocated in FY20 that were not expected to be spent by the end of the fiscal year be included in the FY21 annual budget discussions for evaluation and appropriations.
And
Okay, Cindy.
yeah, just what that means, I think, operationally, is that that money that was allocated originally for the purpose of housing stays in that housing bucket, so to speak, so that it isn't falling to fund balance and getting reallocated to other things. It's just reinforcing the commitment that the council and administration have all said stays in housing.
Stays in the silos, right?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
We made it through.
We did. So thank you all very much, David. Thank you for being here. Thank you for everything.
All the background work.
Yeah, no, seriously, and I know that it was, I know we bumped up on the agenda, but things worked out. So thank you.
It's my son's birthday today, so I get to make it to the party.
Birthday party for
there
Randy.
you go. Okay. Well, wish him a happy birthday.
Thanks.
Okay. So we are going to bounce back to the first item on our agenda, which was the analysis of Salt Lake City Change Atlas and apartment market. We do have representatives from the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute here. Dayan I saw Dayan here, and Jim Wood. DJ Ben Wayne. Oh, DJ, okay. All right. So Dayan, I'll turn the time over to you, and you can introduce everybody. And
thank you, everyone. We apologize for missing the first quarter. We just had a little miscommunication. My name is Dayan Eskich. I'm a senior research analyst with the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute. My colleague here, DJ Benway, will be giving an update on the just newly released apartment market report we gave to your staff a couple of weeks ago. The atlas right here when you guys had, I think you had a retreat up at our shop, and a couple of other documents. So I'm just going to kind of briefly introduce the topic we're going to talk about today. So unless you've been living under a rock, we're having crazy housing issues, and that's a byproduct of our economic success. And as a state as a whole, we're about 50,000 units short, and that doesn't mean that these people are necessarily homeless. It just means the vacancy rate is the lowest it's ever been. Days on the market for housing sales is 2 to 3 weeks in some cases, and a lot of doubling up is happening. And those most vulnerable, the biggest issues with the most vulnerable, on the lower income at 30 and 60% below the median. And right now we've been working with the state and the bigger kind of housing coalition with the chamber as well to start figuring out how to deal with this issue. So just for reference, for example, right now, as of June, Salt Lake City alone has approximately permitted, not under construction, permitted about 2,200 new apartment units. Now that's 75% of last year's or previous peaks total in 2015 at about 3,000. So just through June, and we anticipated that the market would slow down given everything that was happening. But in our conversation with the developers and everything, they feel like costs are only on the rise. So they might just get in right now, given the opportunity zone opportunities, get in right now, kind of deal with the economics of their cash flow, and anticipate that in the next couple of years they'll be able to stabilize. So contributing to this kind of conundrum is the construction labor costs. Everybody's being hit on all sides. So DJ will kind of take you through our latest findings just on how much the rents have changed in their market, and I'll hand it over to you for now, and we'll take questions as we go on.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us. My name is DJ Benway. As he mentioned, I work with Jim Wood and Dayon. I kind of focus in the last few years here on apartments. As anybody, like he said, can see, there's more apartments than Salt Lake City, than Salt Lake County, than Utah has ever seen being built today. So everything that I'm about to show you here should be somewhat familiar, whether you've seen these exact graphics or, like I said, you've experienced driving around your communities. Since 2000, there's been an absolute explosion in the number of apartment buildings. We've seen permits here. This graphic here that you see on the scene shows cumulative apartments since 2000, issued permits in Salt Lake City alone. And obviously, I'll highlight a few things. The first is in about 2009, you'll see a bit of a flat spot where kind of apartment development slowed. That's the effects of the Great Recession. In Salt Lake City, they were a little bit longer than, say, if you Google the Great Recession right now, it probably only lasted 2 years. The effect on the housing market was a little bit longer, more specifically in Salt Lake City. But then you'll see right there at about 2013, 2014 is when the housing market recovered, essentially. It recovered, and it started a whole new explosion. I don't want to call it a boom because I don't necessarily think there's going to be a bust. I just want to say that there has been a significantly large number of apartments permitted in Salt Lake City. My guess is it's the screen. I didn't format specifically for any specific screen. That exact graphic will also be found in the report I wrote last year that came out in August 2018, called The Salt Lake City's Current Apartment Boom. So if you want to look at that in more detail, you can find it there, or we have copies that we can provide you today. So obviously that has an effect on Salt Lake City and the state of Utah. And why this graphic I think is especially important is this is showing the composition of housing units now in Salt Lake City. The red color that you see here is apartments. So again, we're focused on building permits here, not existing housing stock. So from 2000 to 2017, 75% of permits of all building types have been apartments in Salt Lake City. As those come online, as those are built, as those are occupied, that will obviously have an effect on the population that can live here and the amount of space that we have. And then just for comparison, as you go kind of down the graphic, you see the balance of Salt Lake County. That's the composition of building permits issued during that same time frame without Salt Lake City included. So that means every other city in an unincorporated county in the area has permitted 20% of all building types have been apartments. The exception to that obviously is the ring counties, because Salt Lake City is not a part of what we call the ring counties. And this is also in that 2018 report, but just real quick, the ring counties are basically any county that touches the Wasatch Front. So we're talking Tooele County, Summit County, Morgan County. At the same time, we've seen this explosion in apartment permits. Vacancy rates have not only not increased, but they've actually decreased. Traditional supply and demand would make you think that as more supply comes online, vacancy rates would increase as we meet demand. The vacancy rate is probably one of the best measures that we have to say that we have not yet found that point. You'll notice this graph only goes to 2018. We do not yet have data on 2019. But you'll see the red line again is Salt Lake County. There's minor fluctuations. I wouldn't focus so much on the minor fluctuations there. I would focus mostly on the major trend that in all of the Wasatch Front, vacancy remain on a downward trend and very low traditionally in general. So obviously vacancy rates are low, so the demand is there. So this figure kind of shows you, and this is now, we've shifted into the 2019 report on rents. This is showing you the change in average apartment rent in Salt Lake County. So this is not just Salt Lake City, this is Salt Lake County. You'll see at the same time we've seen an explosion in apartment permits, we're seeing an explosion in rent. Again, traditional supply and demand would say as supply increases, unless demand is meeting that, prices would probably stabilize. I mean, I think the graphic speaks for itself. I mean, it's on an upward trajectory and it has been for quite some time. And if you compare that to the earlier graphics that you saw, this is happening in tandem with an explosion in permits, so therefore an explosion in supply.
Mr. Chair, I guess if you go back to that previous slide, my question for you is, and I'm sure this is I'll answer my own question, Utah County and Salt Lake County, they're pretty comparable in rents. Is
Correct.
that due to Utah County and the universities down there?
It could certainly be a possibility. My guess would also be, since this is apartments, it's not only a university crowd, it's going to include people moving in for employment in Utah County. Whether that's they're living in an apartment temporarily while they find a house, or they're choosing to live in an apartment while they come to Utah or Utah County for employment. Do you have anything to say on that, Dan?
Yeah, another just way to think about it, kind of the Salt Lake County market in general, it's kind of a inverted curve in a way. Mm-hmm. A lot of the new stuff is at the high end, and same in Utah County as well. A lot of the new product coming online is, hitting the $2,000 mark for a 2-bedroom. So that's kind of starting to equalize the two markets a little bit. And Utah County is growing at a much faster rate than Salt Lake County, so the demand is certainly there for them as well.
Cool. So that kind of actually is a decent segue into kind of what I'll talk about next. So here you're seeing average apartment rent by zip code. There's a lot to unpack here. And you'll see actually the southern parts of the county actually have some of the highest average apartment rents. And a lot of that is exactly what Dayon was just referencing. It's newer apartments, it's larger apartments. They tend to be more expensive apartments. The apartments that are being built down there are, they're targeting some certain demographics. And those demographics that they're targeting are paying these higher monthly rents. And they're coming with, new everything, high amenity apartments. They're not just, four walls and a kitchen.
And it's pushing existing rents to go up, because if I'm next to one of these higher end projects, I feel like I can raise my rents a little bit higher just to be enough below theirs to still entice some competition. But you're starting to see rents going up without any amenities being offered. It just, the market keeps moving up.
So does that explain, because I was looking at this graph and it surprised me, but now, hearing your explanation, it makes a little bit more sense. So for example, 84108, which is the zip code right around the university, it struck me as being very interesting that zip code, which is one of the higher property value costs in the county, is the lowest average apartment rent.
Right.
And is that so? But that's mainly because most of the apartment stock is older, and we don't.
Yes.
And there hasn't been anything built.
Part of it, it's older stock. Also, it's probably has a couple of students per unit, so that tends to get diluted in the data.
Okay.
If you looked at the permits for new apartment projects, there's nothing being built in that zip code. So whatever apartments are there are older apartments. They're already existing apartments.
Okay.
They were built for a time that wasn't 2018.
All right, that makes sense.
So now if you contrast that with this map, which is actually showing you the percent change in apartment rent from 2000 to 2018. So this map, shows a lot of expensive apartments, kind of a higher average apartment rent in the south. The percent change map kind of shifts that. You're seeing actually higher percent changes up in the northern part of the county in Salt Lake City. And again, there's caveats to that. Some of that is some of these southern zip codes that, where it says data not available, is because there weren't apartments that we have, at least apartments that we have data for, that had rent. So they may have, a new project may have been built in one of those zip codes that comes on with a very high average rent, but we can't measure that change because in 2000 there was not an apartment building to compare that to. So that's why you'll see up in the zip code that's up there in the avenues has an extremely high change in apartment rent.
So what role does Salt Lake City's focus on affordable housing play in the apartment costs?
So Salt Lake City probably has some of the more affordable housing stock or apartment stock. And if you look at just the distribution of Section 8 vouchers, we don't have the map here, but a majority of it is Salt Lake City and kind of the western part of Salt Lake County. So building new affordable housing is really difficult to pencil. And so there's a lot of opportunity in refabbing the existing stock. And so I think looking forward, we just had a conversation with some of the state leaders yesterday, is we're not going to build our way out of the affordability problem, but maybe we could rehab our way out of it. And there's, in my world, if I had all the time in the world to study this, it would be identifying where are those low-hanging fruits that we could put those, your per square foot bang for your buck is a lot higher on rehabbing a 70s building than, building from the ground up.
Okay.
I'll also say, since I hope we're not running over on time or anything.
Good.
But my general conclusion from that report is that I think what Salt Lake City and communities around Salt Lake County need to focus on are these high average rents, and considering the new buildings and what they're coming online and the rents that they're charging, and whether our residents can or cannot afford that, and the effect that has on the overall apartment market.
And just the overall market, I think the ADU is also another low-hanging fruit that's kind of there for us to take advantage of. Mm-hmm. And, I applaud you guys for being a leader on that, and I hope to see more cities follow suit on that, because it's tight out there.
Great. Cindy?
Just a question about what you said about rehabbing.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we looked at as a staff is that in doing the rehabbing, you're kind of moving people around.
Right.
And so I want to check with you to see if you're talking about rehabbing apartment buildings or rehabbing other existing structures to convert them to apartments.
Both. So an example that I've talked to a developer about, there was a 200 apartment unit. I think it was somewhere about 2700 South. I can't remember off the top of my head. It might not be directly in Salt Lake City. The owner of that unit passed away, and the average rents were about $800. And so the trust decided they were going to put it up for sale. So the developer that was bidding on it was trying to keep it affordable, had a whole plan, and was outbid by a 1031 exchange out of California that's just going to come in, remodel it, and put in new fixtures, countertops, and charge about $1,800 in rent. So that was kind of a missed opportunity for the affordable market to kind of keep those units affordable. So I think that as some of these assets might shift hands, we need to look at opportunities and programs where we could keep housing affordable. Because we're kind of having it on the two fronts. It's keeping housing affordable and also...
And then losing affordable.
Yeah.
Okay. So the struggle we were having is that we couldn't see how the rehabbing would add to the housing stock because they're kind of the same units and you're displacing people for a while.
Right, but it's also keeping it affordable and not losing it.
Yeah, got it. Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
Other?
We might come to this later, but you said up front about the permitting process that permits are being pulled in very high numbers still, but it's detached from actually thinking the market could sustain it. They're guessing they will, but they're just saying it's going to be more expensive to build these in 2 years from now than now.
Yeah.
Therefore, let's front the costs and kind of float it until we can.
Right. And we're seeing, so in 2018 and 2017, we permitted about 1,300 units, maybe.
Maybe those years combined, yeah.
Yeah, combined. So far this year, through June, that's the latest data we have, we're at 2,200. And there's just been a rush to the market as well because everybody sees their costs increasing exponentially.
So do you have any more drill down discussion about sustainability of that for developers, for instance? Will the market correct it at all, or are they able to sort of sustain this through not getting income, I guess?
You're starting to see you're not seeing any rents going down anywhere. What you are starting to see is some newer projects offering higher incentives. So, referral fees are back, or instead of having a first month rent free, they're 2 months. So they're starting to play with that a little bit. But in terms of overall, the housing market itself nationally, if you talk to all of us housing wonks, it's about in the middle of the 8th inning where we are with supply and demand. And part of it is the market is severely overpriced, but it's also severely undersupplied. So whatever happens in the economy, the demand for housing doesn't go away. Especially in Utah, because we're growing every day. Even if our in-migration goes to zero, we're still going to grow. So that's kind of the challenge, and that's where they see it as, we feel comfortable kind of being a little riskier to get ahead of this. And majority of the developers that are doing these big projects and the investment firms, they're in a much better financial position than they were back in 2008. Their debt is a lot lower, so they're able to sustain these projects for a longer period of time without them being fully occupied.
Great.
Okay.
Good.
I also just pulled up this figure here really quick to talk about it. So this is what you're seeing here are permits issued for apartments by quarter in just Salt Lake City. I'll first say it's kind of weird to look at it by quarters, just because, a big apartment project, 300 units, can really skew that. And a quarter with no apartment projects isn't really weird. A quarter is only 3 months. It wouldn't be strange to not see an apartment permit. So it may look a little weird, but the reason I did it for quarters because you'll see, I believe it was 2014, Salt Lake City had a moratorium on impact fees. And as a result, we saw a huge spike in apartment permits. You see it right there, 1,693 apartment permits in a single quarter. We attribute a lot of that probably to the moratorium on impact fees. Developers kind of pushed to get their permit application in to save on those impact fees. So you see that weird spike, and then there was kind of a lull after, and what that kind of says to me in my analysis was that because they pushed before the impact fees, people that would have maybe waited another couple months to submit their permit, submitted it a little bit earlier than they would have, so we saw a bit of a lull. And you'll see up to Q2 of this year, so that's June 2019, we almost hit that peak again. But there wasn't a policy that I'm at least aware of to spike that. So you can people can come to their own speculation as to why that is, but some of it could be what my colleague here, Dayon, was saying, that they see now as a cheaper time to build than maybe a year, 2 years, 3 years into the future. Just a possibility. I'm no idea if that's true or not. So to go along with that,
Councilmember Wharton?
Go ahead.
Yeah, Councilmember Wharton has a question.
And why was the impact fee like such a spike instead of like a plateau during the whole time that we had the impact fee moratorium?
I'm not sure that I can explain why it wasn't. Could be delayed planning, or maybe the opportunity, developer had the opportunity late in the game knowing about the moratorium, and then they just, they pulled an audible and they really, really rushed to put it through.
I think it's just timing. We all kind of do everything in the last 5 minutes.
Sorry, yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer on that one.
Okay.
Cool. So on this next one here, you'll just see, so to go along with that idea, one of the potential reasons why it may feel cheaper to build now are these opportunity zones that are located here in downtown Salt Lake City. So what you're seeing here are the two downtown zip codes that are opportunity zones. And these are proposed projects. These are not necessarily projects that have been issued building permits. They're not necessarily completely finalized. You'll see the Salt Lake's Redevelopment Agency's project. I even have an asterisk just because 300 is the number that I've heard. But nothing, I'm not aware of a permit. I'm not aware of a final number yet. So this is just kind of showing that if developers are getting benefits from the opportunity zones that they may not get in a couple of years, they may be permitting these projects here in downtown Salt Lake City in these opportunity zones. Dayon's kind of our resident expert on opportunity zones, so I'll let him take over.
That's kind of you. I don't think there's an expert on opportunity zones, but we are seeing a big rush, and part of that, I think the unforeseen consequence of the opportunity zone, it's fueling the fire and gentrification. A lot of higher end projects are coming online because you're starting to see more than ever outside institutional investor money just looking for an opportunity zone to put their capital gains in. So that's rushed a lot of projects ahead of time. Specifically, for example, the Carl's Jr. site. I know that was 5-10 years out maybe, and now that's been announced and they're moving forward. So that's one of those projects that's been, or maybe it's moving forward. So I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but. And the project next to the Maverick building, I can't remember the name of it. I apologize. Those two projects are supposed to be very high-end rental units, attracting your investment bankers, NBA players. So just through the kind of the grapevine, the eyes of the country are on those two projects, see how successful that they will be. And if they work out the way the developers have envisioned to work out, I think it'll really change our market. For better or worse, we could see that the success of that project really elevate rents even further up, because it'll create more of a kind of a higher end dynamic in downtown.
Any other questions before I make a final thought?
Nope.
Great. So that was just kind of a little snippet of all of the data that we were able to provide you over this year and last year. And kind of my final thoughts on this are, if you kind of compare this stuff to the Change Atlas that we also provided you, Salt Lake City is changing in a lot of ways. And, that has a lot of effect on potential amazing things and potential hardships for Salt Lake City as it continues to grow. And I think the strength of our development in apartments kind of shows there is demand that could be coming from many different places, including a changing in preferences for people looking to live in downtown Salt Lake City. We're shifting towards, I think it was a couple of years ago, based on ACS data, we are now we have more renters in Salt Lake City than homeowners. That has implications. The type of units that are being built tend to be newer, obviously new, higher end. They're coming in with a higher price tag to start, which is attracting a very different type of renter than maybe Salt Lake City has seen in the past. And as our economy remains strong, our population continues to grow, we're going to continue to feel these pressures, and Salt Lake City is going to become a more dynamic market, and more importantly, a more dynamic rental market. So in terms of affordable housing, we can't just think of apartments as affordable. Not all apartments are affordable, and not all apartments coming our way, no matter how many of them there are necessarily going to be affordable to all of our residents. So looking at the rental market as its own dynamic market with its own mix of products is going to be the most important.
Great. Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you. Thank you for this update. It was really amazing and kind of frightening in some ways to look at, right? And interestingly, I was going through my emails earlier today, and the National League of Cities just put out a report on housing throughout the country, and defined sort of major cities throughout every state as what kind of housing, what category they would be in, and they list Salt Lake as rent burdened, and clearly we are, right? I mean, to go from a general rent of what, $600 or $700 or $800 in 2000 to over almost double that in 8 years later, 18 years later. That's frightening, and there's a lot I think we have to look at how we actually identify and address the affordability and the accessibility of housing. So I appreciate this study a lot. One of the things that we were talking about as well earlier today, and I was thinking about, Dan, is that are you guys going to do, now, where's Jen Bruno? I have to get the terminology correct. The census, the high opportunity census tract, because this is sort of the data that will inform whether we have different high opportunity census tract areas, correct?
Areas of opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. So if I'm understanding you correct, part of that is HUD updates that. We provide them with data. We will take that question to our demography team. They tend to work closer with the actual census.
Okay. Yeah, I think it would be nice if in the future maybe we
up.
can have another update from you
No,
guys.
we would love to, and I know
opportunity
we're
zones.
kind of off our clock today on the schedule, so we're happy to come back and provide you with any more updates. you
I've
guys.
got a follow-up to that.
Yep. Councilmember Rogers.
So I guess that's my question is, I don't remember if it was the University of Utah or Salt Lake County, but they did the areas of opportunity, creating that, and housing was one of those components. And I'm just wondering, I don't know if this is part of the contract or it can be, if we look at updating that with the housing. I think this is the most recent data, checking to see how that we're creating areas of opportunity. One of the goals of the RDA was to establish affordable housing across the city, right?
Yeah.
Not just in one area. And I would love to see if that has created a difference with what we've been looking at.
Yeah, we can figure that out. Absolutely, we're on board.
Yeah, so first off, thank you for being here and for putting all this together. Councilmember Rogers bringing up the affordable housing pieces, that's kind of where I was going initially. It would be very, very helpful to see just, what impact our decisions have had. Because I think it's going to inform whatever else we choose to do related to affordable housing. So, that information I think is going to be very, very helpful for us and hopefully for other cities that can follow suit as well.
We'll make sure to provide you that.
Okay. Councilmember Fowler.
Just one other comment. I also really appreciated this idea, and I think it is something we need to continue looking at, where is the low-hanging fruit? Because we're not going to build our way out of this. And all we're seeing, right, is that even if we continue adding units, right now they're not affordable for the majority of people, right? So I really appreciate you bringing up the ADUs, but I think we as a council still can be creative on what is, and working with administration and staff and everybody of where is that low-hanging fruit and how do we create policies that sort of encourage that affordability with those rehabs or whatever kind of creativity we can come up with some of that.
Yeah, so we actually just started a study we're doing internally and in partnership with the chamber, looking at best practices in affordable housing, looking at Utah examples and also outside of Utah. So we will be coming out with a report later in the year that addresses that very question. Yeah, so thanks for that, Lowball.
Great. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
We
Yes,
really
thank you.
appreciate it. The next item on our agenda is item number 5, which is the temporary closure of a portion of 21st South between approximately SR 201 and 7200 West. And Brian Fulmer is our council policy analyst who will walk us through this. Jennifer Seelig, the mayor's senior advisor, is here, as well as Kevin Young, Sergeant Sam Wolf, and Tom Trevino.
Good afternoon. While they're getting up to the table here, I'll do a brief introduction. This area of 2100 South is problematic because it's regularly used for illegal disposal of tires and other solid waste. And there are a few factors that play into this. There's lack of street lighting, and it's quite isolated, so it makes it an attractive spot for people to participate in this illicit activity. So the plan is to close this for 1 year or until the mitigation is complete, and then the mayor will make a determination about reopening it. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Seelig.
Great. Dr. Seelig.
Thank you, Council Chair Luke, and thank you, council members and staff. I do want to express my appreciation for you taking your time out of your busy schedule to hear this CAT team. It's a CAT team neighborhood issue. So we're thrilled to be here to be able to involve you all in our problem solving. I also really wanted to thank council staff for their help in navigating the operational aspects and potential policy issues related to this. It's a new solution that we are trying. I did want to point out a couple of things on the transmittal. And the good Mr. Fulmer did do this in his staff report, but I wanted to amplify this a little bit. We did contain letters from the Department of Natural Resources in support of this endeavor, as well as the City of West Valley, the Police Department here in Salt Lake City, and the Salt Lake County Health Department. The state, in particular, the Department of Natural Resources, has invested time and money in helping us with this potential solution, as well as reconfiguring one of their internal roads to try to help with enforcement. So they've been a good partner in trying to problem solve. And with that, if it pleases the council chair, we'd like to move to the health department, the police department, and then the transportation division for their information.
Okay, my name is Tom Trevino. I'm with the Salt Lake County Health Department in environmental health. A little bit of a history on this. This has been a problematic area since the mid-1980s and been an ongoing thing that we've given attention to, and I suppose that there's been other agencies. Primarily from the standpoint of the health department's perspective, there's concerns for the environmental degradation of that area, and this is basically attributed to the large amount of tires that are disposed of there. They end up in the playas. These present a real problem for the breeding of mosquitoes and rodents. There's been an ongoing dumping of, various hazardous materials. Sometimes this is, just the actual hazardous materials itself. Sometimes it's in the form of old abandoned vehicles, motorhomes, and that type of thing, all that seep out, get into the water and the soil out there, and a lot of solid waste. We strongly support the closure of this in the hopes that we can find a better solution than what's been going on for the last several decades out here. As Jennifer had said, there was a great amount of collaboration between many agencies to take care of this last cleanup. And it involved West Valley City, Salt Lake City, the county jail, the state, and numerous individuals. Can you go ahead and go to the next slide? Go back to the next one, please. So I'm not going to talk in detail about the closure because that's really not my area of expertise. But I did want to point out that on the west end of that red double line, underneath it is where one of the main playas are. And that area, which I have photos of in just a few minutes, is heavily, was where there's a tremendous amount of tires and things that are dumped. But the majority of the dumping is taking on the south side of that road and then some to the north, but the majority is down to the south. Okay, is that clear? Can you go to the next one? This is, after having some discussion with some of the people who put these numbers together, I was determined that this probably is not really accurate. I think the possibility is that it's considerably higher. Not all labor costs were involved in this, or calculated in this, and that was due to one of the people who were tracking all this. His computer crashed about 3 times on him, and he lost some of it. But we know that it is has quite a bit more labor costs than what is showing here. So we are, looking at well over $50,000. And when taking into costs on this, this is just for that cleanup itself. This doesn't really include, all of the time that is spent with, all of the agencies that might be involved in, patrolling it, going out and cleaning it up, the meetings and the internal dialogues that have led to the cleanup. And go to the next slide. This is a breakdown of what was found out there. There was approximately 172 tons of material, of solid waste that was removed from there. And basically that is broken down to about 132 pounds of solid waste. Then there is approximately 40 tons of tires. You also see that there's some green waste. This is a huge mix of waste. I mean, it's such a convenient place and so isolated and dark that it's just really easy to go out there and dump this. And it kind of seems like, once you've got a seed pile there of trash, it just keeps building. And then go to the next slide. These next slides for the rest of this presentation just give you an idea of what this area looked like prior to the cleanup. As I said, approximately 4,000 tires there. A good number of those were recycled. The health department and the state covered the costs for that. Those tires that are encrusted with mud and those types of things have to be hauled out to the landfill. But you can see there's boats, there's construction materials. Go on to the next slide, please. Tires, tires, tires. Carpets, next slide. Abandoned vehicles, and of course the hazardous waste that I spoke of. The next slide shows more of just the kind of the solid waste, which is the majority of what was picked up in August of last year. There's dead animals out there, just everything imaginable. The health department continues to monitor this in conjunction with both West Valley and Salt Lake City. We do send out a person to do some cleanup and try to keep that down and, kind of prevent it from the broken window concept of attracting more. Our hopes is that eventually that there can be behavioral changes, due to a temporary closure on this. And I don't think that we've got other locations that are as prime of a location for this kind of activity. And I think through, the monitoring and the reduced accessibility, hopefully we can make some headway on this. Do you have any questions?
That was very, very thorough. So I don't. Councilmember Johnston does.
I fully support the effort. Would you take just 1 second, maybe talk about what's been tried in the past prior to leading up to this intervention?
I think that it's been a lot of individual agencies not working together as collaboratively as they have in more recent times. Due to the remoteness, it's really difficult. There have been cameras that have been put up out there to try to determine who's doing this. And of course, it's a number of people, of course. You can tell by all the different kinds of trash. The problem is again, lighting, clarity of the images, and in many cases, the cameras disappear, within 24 hours of them going up, or they get shot or something of this sort. So it's been basically unsuccessful to this point.
Okay, other questions? Dr. Seelig.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Sergeant Wolf could also speak to the police department and CAT team's involvement with enforcement to add depth and breadth to our response.
Absolutely. As was discussed, it is a remote location and there aren't any power lines up in this area, and so there are no lights in this area. So people come, they pull up, they can dump all their stuff out into the wetlands area and drive off. And we have tried to put up cameras, but most of our cameras rely on having power. So what we've been able to see is people coming and going and trash appearing, but we haven't been able to determine who is dumping all of that garbage. And in addition to that, we also see drug paraphernalia, alcohol bottles, just remnants of other crimes that are occurring in this area. And the only way to get eyes on those crimes is to put an officer in the area. And it's such a remote area, it's just such a remote location, it's just not feasible to get an officer out there when these crimes are happening. And so we have relied a lot on the DNR, and they've been able to see a lot of crimes. They've been able to report a lot of incidents happening in the area. And so they've given us a lot of this information that they've chased people off, that they've seen this illegal activity happening and occurring in the area. And it's very frustrating. It takes us quite a bit of time to get to this remote location. And by the time we get there are people that are gone. We have caught people that have been out there committing crimes, but it's a rarity. And we know that there's more crime occurring than we are actually catching, just because of the remote location, the lack of lighting. One of the things that our unit specifically works on is CPTED, which is crime prevention through environmental design. We try to put eyes in the area, but there's just no eyes in the area. There's just businesses on either end, and so there's just not people to say what crimes are happening, so nobody's calling us. So it's just a perfect haven for people to come and to commit crimes in those areas. So that's why we would recommend also the road closure.
Thank you.
The temporary road closure.
Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I certainly support closing this road and getting it cleaned up and taken care of. What are some of the, as you all have, these different entities have worked together in this collaborative effort to kind of address this issue, what are some of the long-term solutions? I've heard a lot about the lighting clearly, so I imagine there's hopefully a plan to get some lights or something out there, but are there other things that have been discussed within the different entities that we could give at least a little idea of how we're going to solve this problem long term?
So we can theorize about that, and I appreciate the question. So, some elements that have come up that we think might be successful, one related to DNR and the reconfiguration of their road to create easier access for them, and then more traffic in that way, again, to the septet concept of eyes and ears. West Valley City mentions in their communication about taking a look at the area and more in their jurisdiction outside of the wetlands and how they're going to develop it. So that certainly would add more traffic, and again, eyes and ears on it. We're really hoping with being able to smartly focus the enforcement in areas where there is lighting, that we can catch some folks. And we have additional information about that we'd be happy to meet with the council offline, or small groups related to that as well. And the lighting, certainly, to your point, council member, has been brought up as well.
And you bring up, if I can ask a follow-up question, and you sort of touched on it, and maybe it was in the report, and but what's the plan to enforce the closure of the road? That people, I mean, will there be officers or somebody or something sort of at the ends of the roads, or
Stationed there all the time. Yes, that's what we're doing. If it pleases the council, I believe that Mr. Young from the Transportation Division could talk about the barricading, the temporary barricading and the signage, and that could lead into enforcement. Would that be of assistance to you? Okay, thank you.
All right, let me see if I can. I was going to try and get to
It's the next slide.
Is it the next one? Okay, so to answer your question, the way it'll be accomplished is through a hard closure at 2 locations in there, approximately 6500 West and 6900 West. And that'll be done through Jersey barriers. So it'll be a hard closure, so no one can get from those points beyond. So that's how it'll be accomplished. And then at 6100 South, where 21st South connects into the frontage road, there'll be signage that tells people that the road's closed ahead, that there's still access to the businesses that are in that area on either end. So it'll be closed that way. The area where the hard closure will take place, there's no active accesses to any businesses or properties. Just some old gates on one property that are no longer used. Any
other questions, comments? Great. Well, thank you all for your help.
Thank you.
And good luck with this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members and staff.
So we've worked through most of our agenda, so we will be taking a break until 5:30 when we will come back to do interviews for board positions. So we will reconvene then.
Hi, I'm Poonam with SLC TV, your government access channel. Ever wonder what happens with your glass recyclables? Where does it even go? We'll find out on this week's episode of Capital City News. Jason Utgard with Momentum Recycling talks to us about how the city recycles, processes, and repurposes its glass. And our History Minute is about Russell Lord Tracy, founder of Tracy Aviary. Let's get started with our legislative update and look back.
At its September 3rd meeting, the City Council was briefed on a proposal to adjust the boundaries between Salt Lake City and Mill Creek, and they also discussed proposed contracts with Salt Lake County that would reimburse the city for various transportation projects and studies. To learn more, visit slc.gov/council.
For the first time ever, Salt Lake City welcomed the world to the 68th Annual United Nations Civil Society Conference. The three-day conference attracted a record-breaking 5,000 plus attendees from 138 countries, bringing together local, national, and global leaders with non-governmental organizations, including faith-based communities, educators, activists, nonprofits, and more than 100 youth representatives, all to talk about how to build sustainable and inclusive cities and communities. Salt Lake City on the leading edge to meet 100% renewable energy by 2032, along with investing in affordable housing and accessible transit, were among some of the reasons we were selected as the first U.S. city outside of the New York City headquarters to host this conference.
I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Salt Lake City honored and recognized Tom, an enslaved black man brought over by the pioneers, with a proper headstone and dedication after he laid in an unmarked grave in the Salt Lake City Cemetery for over 150 years. The city and community shared Tom's story and recognized him along with many other African slaves who built and shaped America today.
We need to remember. We need to remember our history. We need to teach our history and let people know that those who were enslaved helped build this nation also. They contribute to the building of this state, and we need to teach that and we need to remember it.
A tasty treat on a hot summer day, that's Operation Chill.
Recycling in Salt Lake City has gotten easier thanks to a partnership with Momentum Recycling. Whether you sign up for curbside glass recycling pickup or you drop off at a site near you, glass is one of the best resources to recycle here in Utah, and it helps our local economy. Jason Utgard with Momentum Recycling has details.
I help manage the over 6,000 residential customers that we service, and we have several hundred commercial customers that we also service for food waste and mixed recycling. Our goal is to help move the community towards zero waste, which obviously is somewhat daunting, but we've made a huge impact so far. We started this facility behind you in 2012, and that was the same year that the Salt Lake City partnered with us to launch the state's first curbside glass recycling program at that time. And so now 7 years later, we're up to over 5,000, 5,000 or 6,000 Salt Lake City residents participate in the program, and we've diverted millions of pounds of glass from the landfill. So right now, this facility, we're processing anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 tons per month, which is about half of the capacity that this facility has. In terms of all of the glass in Utah's waste stream, we think we're anywhere between 12 to 15% capture rate, which means that at least 80% of the glass waste that's being generated in the state of Utah is not making it to our facility here. And this facility is the only one in the whole Rocky Mountain region So all of the glass that's recycled anywhere in Utah or even some surrounding states makes its way here. So we have a huge gap where we can still make up and capture a lot more glass. And the most important thing to us is just letting people know that we exist and educating them on how to recycle glass and where they can do so. Glass recycling is, of all the materials, say you took all of your recyclables, your glass, cardboard, plastic, paper, and you spread them out on the table, and I told you to grab the materials that were the best for Utah. Glass is the best material for Utah because it's collected locally, it's processed here locally, and then it's used by a local industry. Any of your other commodities, your paper, cardboard, plastic, those are going to be baled up and most likely shipped out of state, and they actually might not benefit Utah as much as glass recycling does. We just launched a mobile app this year. We have almost 1,000 people that have downloaded it, and what it does is it will tell you when your next pickup day is. It will also tell you, so hey, my pickup is on the 4th of July. I wonder if Momentum Recycling is coming today. Well, you can see right there, yeah, we are coming today. You can also use our Waste Wizard. So there's a little button on there. You can search for whatever material you're wondering can go into which stream. So maybe you have a ceramic coffee mug, and you're wondering, oh, is this? I think this is glass, but maybe you're arguing with your spouse or your roommate about it. Well, you can look it up on the app and realize, actually, no, that can't be recycled. It's actually not made of glass. But you can use our Waste Wizard to help you know what goes in the bin. Right now, at this point, our total number of drop-off locations is somewhere around 16 to 20. They're located all throughout the city. There's actually a map on Momentum Recycling's website. You can actually put in your address and find the one that's nearest you. You can also go on Salt Lake City Green's website and find one. They're at a lot of popular parks, Popperton Park up in the Avenues, Liberty Park downtown. There's one up by the zoo. And then we have some smaller glass pods actually that are a little bit larger bins like this, so we've placed in kind of smaller, harder to reach locations. So for more information, you can go to momentumrecycling.com and just click on Utah, and then you can find your nearest drop-off location, or you can sign up for the service.
Next up is our History Minute.
Born in Ohio in 1860, Russell Lord Tracy slowly made his way west until he found himself in Salt Lake City in 1892. There, he built his own mortgage and loan business right downtown. With his two sons having passed away, Tracy had little to occupy his time and became an avid collector of birds. Many he displayed in cages outside his home. Visitors flocked to his yard to see the rare birds on display, and Tracy decided that a public park might be better suited to housing his unique collection. He was able to petition the Salt Lake City Commission to set aside a substantial portion of Liberty Park's southwest corner to build an aviary. Russell Tracy was the chief benefactor of that aviary, agreeing to turn over more than 200 birds to the city as well as all the equipment to care for them, and a substantial cash donation to buy more birds and enhance the park further. At 11 a.m. on Saturday, July 2nd, 1938, Tracy Aviary opened for business, but birds were not the only thing there in the original 4 acres of the park. It was home to seals, kangaroos, chimpanzees, and even a rambunctious ram that caused all manner of damage. After more than 80 years of operation, Tracy Aviary is the oldest aviary in the country and sits on 8 acres in Liberty Park with a collection of more than 400 birds.
That's it for another episode of Capital City News. Join us next time to stay up to date on all the latest. For SLC TV, I'm Poonam Kumar, signing off from Tracy Aviary. Salt Lake City welcomes distinguished guests and leaders to the 68th United Nations Civil Society Conference, happening right here at the Salt Palace Convention Center. This is the first time this conference has been held in the United States, outside of the New York City headquarters. On this week's episode of Capital City News, we hear from Vicki Bennett, the city's sustainability director, and how Salt Lake City is working to address the goals of the conference, but also how to create a sustainable future. And our History Minute, just in time for Rivalry Week, is about Coach Ron McBride at the University of Utah. Let's get started with our legislative update and look back.
At its August 20th meeting, the City Council, acting as the RDA Board, approved the RDA's Capital Improvement Program project's funding. And as the City Council, they held their Truth in Taxation public hearing formally completing the annual budget process. They also welcomed those visiting Salt Lake as part of the 68th United Nations Civil Society Conference. To learn more, visit slc.gov/council.
School is back in session, which means young pedestrians are out walking to and from school. The Salt Lake City Streets Division took extra precaution this summer by repainting 1,700 crosswalks with reflective white paint, including 200 within school zones. Drivers are reminded to slow down in school zones and at crosswalks, stop for school buses, pay attention to flashing lights and signals, and to always be on the lookout for pedestrians. Crossing guards like Judy Burr play a vital role in keeping children safe while also reminding drivers that roads are a shared space.
Drivers need to slow down and be aware that there are children present and that the lights are usually flashing, and if the lights are not flashing, they need to be mindful of the cones and also our signs.
Salt Lake City is currently hiring crossing guards. David Tola, Program Director for Salt Lake City Compliance, shares details.
It's not a volunteer job. I know many people think it's a volunteer job. We do pay $13 an hour. It's 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon. You also do get a UTA transit pass that you can use at any time, both to and from work, but also in your personal life. If you'd like to apply for the job, visit slcgov.com, click on jobs or careers, and look for the job. It's called School Part-Time Crossing Guard.
This year's 68th United Nations Civil Society Conference focuses on making cities more safe, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. Vicki Bennett, the City Sustainability Director, breaks down this year's UN Goal 11 and some of our targets and what the city is doing to address those. First, we start with how Salt Lake City is working to address affordable housing.
Over the last decade, inequality has rippled through our city. Stable quality housing has grown more expensive and out of reach for far too many. To meet that challenge, Salt Lake City has fundamentally shifted how we think and act on housing. Our housing plan, Growing Salt Lake City, keeps equity and fairness at the forefront of all decisions. Housing stability is a key component of addressing our region's homelessness crisis, which is why we're opening 2 new homeless resource centers this year, transforming the way our community cares for the most vulnerable people in our community.
And now we move to how the city is working to create accessible transportation.
More than half of the pollution we breathe is caused by vehicles, and Salt Lake City knows that reliable public transportation is critical to getting people out of their cars and clearing the air. Historically, the capital city focused on north and south connectivity, which has created an equitable system that doesn't serve all residents. But with our new transit master plan, that's changing. Transit service is expanding to include higher frequency and later hours. We're also creating new public-private partnerships to explore new ways to move people around the city in a more sustainable way. Transportation is at the heart of a sustainable, thriving city with equitable access to jobs, homes, recreation, and shopping.
Now we talk about how the city is preserving cultural heritage.
In Salt Lake City, we are interested in preservation not only to keep the past alive, but to inspire a more creative and sustainable future. With continued investments in the historic places of our city, we're trying to show residents and visitors that preservation matters. In the 2020 budget, over $1 million was set aside to restore the Fisher Mansion Carriage House to become a public nature center along the Jordan River Trail. Visitors will be able to rent kayaks, enjoy festivals, and take part in educational programs, all on a historic property that dates back to 1893. In Salt Lake City, we are funding preservation, making it more accessible and visible to all residents.
Our next target goal focuses on clean energy.
Salt Lake City is constantly working to conserve resources, reduce pollution, slow climate change, and ensure a healthy, sustainable future. In 2016, we became the 16th city in the United States to establish a 100% clean energy goal. We're working diligently to fulfill this pledge, from passing ordinances that help reduce pollution to building green infrastructure like our 2 brand new net zero fire stations, the first in the United States. We also teamed with the federal government to make our new international airport, opening in 2020, LEED Gold certified. Beyond that, Salt Lake City has leveraged the help of nearby cities and our utility partner, Rocky Mountain Power, to establish a framework to allow us to become a net 100% renewable electricity community by 2030.
And for our last goal, Vicki Bennett talks about our commitment to parks and open spaces.
Salt Lake City's parks and open spaces are some of the most treasured assets in our community. With 690 acres of parkland and dozens of large, medium, and neighborhood-sized parks, these public spaces enrich our community and natural environment. In the last year, the city has made improvements at a dozen parks to make them more accessible and inclusive for all residents. And in 2018, we saw the addition of Salt Lake City's 7th community garden. Not only do community gardens help residents eat fresh, healthy food with a lower carbon footprint, they encourage people to get outside and exercise, all while preserving green space in our cities.
And now it's time for our History Minute.
Through the 1980s, the University of Utah did not have a great football team. And then in 1990, they hired Ron McBride to be their head coach. Utah was an underachieving program, he said that year. Their expectations weren't that high. When they hired me, they said, well, if you cannot embarrass us against BYU and be in about the middle of the league and be respectable, you can stay here as long as you want. The bar was low. McBride stepped in and by his second season gave the Utes their best record since 1985. A year later, he took the Utes to the 1992 Copper Bowl, which was their first bowl appearance in almost 3 decades. His 13 years as Utah's head coach were far and away the most successful of his career. With the Utes, McBride posted an overall record of 88-63. He took the Utes to 5 more bowl games. His best season came in 1994, though, when the Utes won a then record 10 games and attained the highest postseason ranking in school history. McBride had raised the bar so high for Utah that it proved to be his undoing. After losing 5 close games and a 5-6 finish in 2002, Coach Mack was let go. Today, the Utes are members of the prestigious Pac-12, a place they would not occupy had it not been for the groundwork laid by Ron McBride over his 13-year tenure as coach.
Thanks for watching this week's episode of Capital City News. Join us next time to stay up to date on all the latest. For SLC TV, I'm Poonam Kumar. Hi, I'm Poonam with SLC TV, your government access channel. Ever wonder what happens with your glass recyclables? Where does it even go? We'll find out on this week's episode of Capital City News. Jason Utgard with Momentum Recycling
proposed contracts with Salt Lake County that would reimburse the city for various transportation projects and studies. To learn more, visit slc.gov/council.
For the first time ever, Salt Lake City welcomed the world to the 68th Annual United Nations Civil Society Conference. The 3-day conference attracted a record-breaking 5,000 plus attendees from 138 countries, bringing together local, national, and global leaders with non-governmental organizations, including faith-based communities, educators, activists, nonprofits, and more than 100 youth representatives, all to talk about how to build sustainable and inclusive cities and communities. Salt Lake City on the leading edge to meet 100% renewable energy by 2032, along with investing in affordable housing and accessible transit, were among some of the reasons we were selected as the first U.S. city outside of the New York City headquarters to host this conference.
I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Salt Lake City honored and recognized Tom, an enslaved black man brought over by the pioneers, with a proper headstone and dedication after he laid in an unmarked grave in the Salt Lake City Cemetery for over 150 years. The city and community shared Tom's story and recognized him along with many other African slaves who built and shaped America today.
We need to remember. We need to remember our history. We need to teach our history and let people know that those who were enslaved helped build this nation also. They contribute to the building of this state, and we need to teach that and we need to remember it.
A tasty treat on a hot summer day, that's Operation Chill.
Recycling in Salt Lake City has gotten easier thanks to a partnership with Momentum Recycling. Whether you sign up for curbside glass recycling pickup or you drop off at a site near you, glass is one of the best resources to recycle here in Utah, and it helps our local economy. Jason Utgard with Momentum Recycling has details.
I help manage the over 6,000 residential customers that we service, and we have several hundred commercial customers that we also service for food waste and mixed recycling. Our goal is to help move the community towards zero waste, which obviously is somewhat daunting, but we've made a huge impact so far. We started this facility behind you in 2012, and that was the same year that the Salt Lake City partnered with us to launch the state's first curbside glass recycling program at that time. And so now 7 years later, we're up to over 5,000, 5,000 or 6,000 Salt Lake City residents participate in the program, and we've diverted millions of pounds of glass from the landfill. So right now, this facility, we're processing anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 tons per month, which is about half of the capacity that this facility has. In terms of all of the glass in Utah's waste stream, we think we're anywhere between 12 to 15% capture rate, which means that at least 80% of the glass waste that's being generated in the state of Utah is not making it to our facility here. And this facility is the only one in the whole Rocky Mountain region. So all of the glass that's recycled anywhere in Utah or even some surrounding states makes its way here. So we have a huge gap where we can still make up and capture a lot more glass. And the most important thing to us is just letting people know that we exist and educating them on how to recycle glass and where they can do so. Glass recycling is, of all the materials, say you took all of your recyclables, your glass, cardboard, plastic, paper, and you spread them out on the table, and I told you to grab the materials that were the best for Utah. Glass is the best material for Utah because it's collected locally, it's processed here locally, and then it's used by local industry. Any of your other commodities, your paper, cardboard, plastic, those are going to be baled up and most likely shipped out of state, and they actually might not benefit Utah as much as glass recycling does. We just launched a mobile app this year. We have almost 1,000 people that have downloaded it, and what it does is it will tell you when your next pickup day is. It will also tell you, so hey, my pickup is on the 4th of July. I wonder if Momentum Recycling is coming today. Well, you can see right there, yeah, we are coming today. You can also use our Waste Wizard. So there's a little button on there. You can search for whatever material you're wondering can go into which stream. So maybe you have a ceramic coffee mug, and you're wondering, oh, is this? I think this is glass, but maybe you're arguing with your spouse or your roommate about it. Well, you can look it up on the app and realize, actually, no, that can't be recycled. It's actually not made of glass. But you can use our Waste Wizard to help you know what goes in the bin. Right now, at this point, our total number of drop-off locations is somewhere around 16 to 20. They're located all throughout the city. There's actually a map on Momentum Recycling's website. You can actually put in your address and find the one that's nearest you. You can also go on Salt Lake City Green's website and find one. They're at a lot of popular parks, Popperton Park up in the Avenues, Liberty Park downtown. There's one up by the zoo. And then we have some smaller glass pods actually that are a little bit larger bins like this, so we've placed in kind of smaller, harder to reach locations. So for more information, you can go to momentumrecycling.com and just click on Utah, and then you can find your nearest drop-off location, or you can sign up for the service.
Next up is our History Minute.
Born in Ohio in 1860, Russell Lord Tracy slowly made his way west until he found himself in Salt Lake City in 1892. There, he built his own mortgage and loan business right downtown. With his two sons having passed away, Tracy had little to occupy his time and became an avid collector of birds. Many he displayed in cages outside his home. Visitors flocked to his yard to see the rare birds on display, and Tracy decided that a public park might be better suited to housing his unique collection. He was able to petition the Salt Lake City Commission to set aside a substantial portion of Liberty Park's southwest corner to build an aviary. Russell Tracy was the chief benefactor of that aviary, agreeing to turn over more than 200 birds to the city as well as all the equipment to care for them, and a substantial cash donation to buy more birds and enhance the park further. At 11 a.m. on Saturday, July 2nd, 1938, Tracy Aviary opened for business, but birds were not the only thing there in the original 4 acres of the park. It was home to seals, kangaroos, chimpanzees, and even a rambunctious ram that caused all manner of damage. After more than 80 years of operation, Tracy Aviary is the oldest aviary in the country and sits on 8 acres in Liberty Park with a collection of more than 400 birds.
That's it for another episode of Capital City News. Join us next time to stay up to date on all the latest. For SLC TV, I'm Poonam Kumar, signing off from Tracy Aviary. Salt Lake City welcomes distinguished guests and leaders to the 68th United Nations Civil Society Conference, happening right here at the Salt Palace Convention Center. This is the first time this conference has been held in the United States, outside of the New York City headquarters. On this week's episode of Capital City News, we hear from Vicki Bennett, the city's sustainability director, and how Salt Lake City is working to address the goals of the conference, but also how to create a sustainable future. And our History Minute, just in time for Rivalry Week, is about Coach Ron McBride at the University of Utah. Let's get started with our legislative update and look back.
At its August 20th meeting, the City Council, acting as the RDA Board, approved the RDA's Capital Improvement Program projects funding. And as the City Council, they held their Truth in Taxation public hearing, formally completing the annual budget process. They also welcomed those visiting Salt Lake as part of the 68th United Nations Civil Society Conference. To learn more, visit slc.gov/council.
School is back in session, which means young pedestrians are out walking to and from school. The Salt Lake City Streets Division took extra precaution this summer by repainting 1,700 crosswalks with reflective white paint, including 200 within school zones. Drivers are reminded to slow down in school zones and at crosswalks, stop for school buses, pay attention to flashing lights and signals, and to always be on the lookout for pedestrians. Crossing guards like Judy Burr play a vital role in keeping children safe while also reminding drivers that roads are a shared space.
Drivers need to slow down and be aware that there are children present and that the lights are usually flashing, and if the lights are not flashing, they need to be mindful of the cones and also our signs.
Salt Lake City is currently hiring crossing guards. David Tola, Program Director for Salt Lake City Compliance, shares details.
It's not a volunteer job. I know many people think it's a volunteer job. We do pay $13 an hour. It's 1 hour in the morning, 1 hour in the afternoon. You also do get a UTA transit pass that you can use at any time, both to and from work, but also in your personal life. If you'd like to apply for the job, visit slcgov.com, click on jobs or careers, and look for the job. It's called School Part-Time Crossing Guard.
This year's 68th United Nations Civil Society Conference focuses on making cities more safe, inclusive, resilient, and sustainable. Vicki Bennett, the City Sustainability Director, breaks down this year's UN Goal 11 and some of our targets and what the city is doing to address those. First, we start with how Salt Lake City is working to address affordable housing.
Over the last decade, inequality has rippled through our city. Stable quality housing has grown more expensive and out of reach for far too many. To meet that challenge, Salt Lake City has fundamentally shifted how we think and act on housing. Our housing plan, Growing Salt Lake City, keeps equity and fairness at the forefront of all decisions. Housing stability is a key component of addressing our region's homelessness crisis, which is why we're opening 2 new homeless resource centers this year, transforming the way our community cares for the most vulnerable people in our community.
And now we move to how the city is working to create accessible transportation.
More than half of the pollution we breathe is caused by vehicles, and Salt Lake City knows that reliable public transportation is critical to getting people out of their cars and clearing the air. Historically, the capital city focused on north and south connectivity, which has created an equitable system that doesn't serve all residents. But with our new transit master plan, that's changing. Transit service is expanding to include higher frequency and later hours. We're also creating new public-private partnerships to explore new ways to move people around the city in a more sustainable way. Transportation is at the heart of a sustainable, thriving city with equitable access to jobs, homes, recreation, and shopping.
Now we talk about how the city is preserving cultural heritage.
In Salt Lake City, we are interested in preservation, not only to keep the past alive, but to inspire a more creative and sustainable future. With continued investments in the historic places of our city, we're trying to show residents and visitors that preservation matters. In the 2020 budget, over $1 million was set aside to restore the Fisher Mansion Carriage House to become a public nature center along the Jordan River Trail. Visitors will be able to rent kayaks, enjoy festivals, and take part in educational programs, all on a historic property that dates back to 1893. In Salt Lake City, we are funding preservation, making it more accessible and visible to all residents.
Our next target goal focuses on clean energy.
Salt Lake City is constantly working to conserve resources, reduce pollution, slow climate change, and ensure a healthy, sustainable future. In 2016, we became the 16th city in the United States to establish a 100% clean energy goal. We're working diligently to fulfill this pledge, from passing ordinances that help reduce pollution to building green infrastructure like our 2 brand new net zero fire stations, the first in the United States. We also teamed with the federal government to make our new international airport, opening in 2020, LEED Gold certified. Beyond that, Salt Lake City has leveraged the help of nearby cities and our utility partner, Rocky Mountain Power, to establish a framework to allow us to become a net 100% renewable electricity community by 2030.
And for our last goal, Vicki Bennett talks about our commitment to parks and open spaces.
Salt Lake City's parks and open spaces are some of the most treasured assets in our community. With 690 acres of parkland and dozens of large, medium, and neighborhood-sized parks, these public spaces enrich our community and natural environment. In the last year, the city has made improvements at a dozen parks to make them more accessible and inclusive for all residents. And in 2018, we saw the addition of Salt Lake City's 7th community garden. Not only do community gardens help residents eat fresh, healthy food with a lower carbon footprint, they encourage people to get outside and exercise, all while preserving green space in our cities.
And now it's time for our History Minute.
Through the 1980s, the University of Utah did not have a great football team. And then in 1990, they hired Ron McBride to be their head coach. Utah was an underachieving program, he said that year. Their expectations weren't that high when they hired me. They said, well, if you cannot embarrass us against BYU and be in about the middle of the league and be respectable, you can stay here as long as you want. The bar was low. McBride stepped in and by his second season gave the Utes their best record since 1985. A year later, he took the Utes to the 1992 Copper Bowl, which was their first bowl appearance in almost 3 decades. His 13 years as Utah's head coach were far and away the most successful of his career. With the Utes, McBride posted an overall record of 88-63. He took the Utes to 5 more bowl games. His best season came in 1994, though, when the Utes won a then record 10 games and attained the highest postseason ranking in school history. McBride had raised the bar so high for Utah that it proved to be his undoing. After losing 5 close games and a 5-6 finish in 2002, Coach Mack was let go. Today, the Utes are members of the prestigious Pac-12, a place they would not occupy had it not been for the groundwork laid by Ron McBride over his 13-year tenure as coach.
Thanks for watching this week's episode of Capital City News. Join us next time to stay up to date on all the latest. For SLC TV, I'm Poonam Kumar. Hi, I'm Poonam with SLC TV, your government access channel. Ever wonder what happens with your glass recyclables? Where does it even go? We'll find out on this week's episode of Capital City News. Jason Utgard with Momentum Recycling talks to us about how the city recycles, processes, and repurposes its glass. And our History Minute is about Russell Lord Tracy, founder of Tracy Aviary. Let's get started with our legislative update and look back.
At its September 3rd meeting, the City Council was briefed on a proposal to adjust the boundaries between Salt Lake City and Mill Creek, and they also discussed proposed contracts with Salt Lake County that would reimburse the city for various transportation projects and studies. To learn more, visit slc.gov/council.
For the first time ever, Salt Lake City welcomed the world to the 68th Annual United Nations Civil Society Conference. The 3-day conference attracted a record-breaking 5,000 plus attendees from 138 countries, bringing together local, national, and global leaders with non-governmental organizations, including faith-based communities, educators, activists, nonprofits, and more than 100 youth representatives, all to talk about how to build sustainable and inclusive cities and communities. Salt Lake City on the leading edge to meet 100% renewable energy by 2032, along with investing in affordable housing and accessible transit, were among some of the reasons we were selected as the first U.S. city outside of the New York City headquarters to host this conference.
I do believe we shall overcome someday.
Salt Lake City honored and recognized Tom, an enslaved black man brought over by the pioneers, with a proper headstone and dedication after he laid in an unmarked grave in the Salt Lake City Cemetery for over 150 years. The city and community shared Tom's story and recognized him along with many other African slaves who built and shaped America today.
We need to remember. We need to remember our history. We need to teach our history and let people know that those who were enslaved helped build this nation also. They contribute to the building of this state, and we need to teach that and we need to remember it.
A tasty treat on a hot summer day, that's Operation Chill.
Recycling in Salt Lake City has gotten easier thanks to a partnership with Momentum Recycling. Whether you sign up for curbside glass recycling pickup or you drop off at a site near you, glass is one of the best resources to recycle here in Utah, and it helps our local economy. Jason Edgard with Momentum Recycling has details.
I help manage the over 6,000 residential customers that we service, and we have several hundred commercial customers that we also service for food waste and mixed recycling. Our goal is to help move the community towards zero waste, which obviously is somewhat daunting, but we've made a huge impact so far. We started this facility behind you in 2012, and that was the same year that the Salt Lake City partnered with us to launch the state's first curbside glass recycling program at that time. And so now 7 years later, we're up to over 5,000, 5,000 or 6,000 Salt Lake City residents participate in the program, and we've diverted millions of pounds of glass from the landfill. So right now, this facility, we're processing anywhere from 1,000 to 1,500 tons per month, which is about half of the capacity that this facility has. Calls waste stream. We think we're
Jill Wilkerson-Smith, who is being appointed to the Utah Performing Arts Center Agency, or the UPACA Board. Hi, Jill.
Hello, Chairperson Luke. Thank
How
you
are
very
you
much.
doing?
I'm doing great. How
Good.
are you?
Good to see you.
Pleasure to be here.
So, tell us why you are interested in serving on the UPACA Board.
Well, I have watched the Utah Performing Arts Center be built over time, and it's a great project, and I really think it's a wonderful opportunity to serve on the board, and the mayor has asked that I serve on the board. I have a lot of experience with the Gallivan Utah Center and have served on their owners association, so a lot of my experience in this type of work kind of stems from that. So I love seeing how those two projects complement one another, and think I can help guide the Eccles Theater to working more complementary with Gallivan.
Great. Well, it's a very rough board. I don't know if you're going to get along with everybody on it.
We're very, very excited to have her institutional knowledge and just ability to look at those numbers and join in the board that way.
Yep.
I'm excited.
You're gonna be
Thank you,
great.
Jen.
Councilmember
Thank you.
Fowler.
Yes, I'm excited to have you on the board as well. I think that especially working in conjunction with the Gallivan Center, I know this year the Urban Arts Festival expanded over into Regent Street from Gallivan Center, and I think having some more of those interactions between Gallivan and Eccles is going to activate Regent Street and be able to kind of elevate that area to what I think the intent was originally in investing all of the money over there. So I think your knowledge in kind of those different areas will be good for the board and for some stuff going on down there.
Great. Thank you.
So thanks, Jill.
Thank you.
Great. Councilmember Valdemoros.
I worked with Jill in the past, and I love working with her, so I think she's going to be very effective wherever she goes, but in this one specifically. So thank you, Jill, for volunteering your time on top of all the work that you have and do so.
Thank you very much.
Back to you.
Okay. Any other comments or questions for Jill? I think we're good. Thank you. So you know the drill.
Yes.
You don't need to stick around for the formal meeting, but you will be on our consent agenda. So thank you very much for your willingness to serve.
Thank you very much.
All right. Our next applicant is Darren Mano, who is being appointed to the Planning Commission. Darren, if you can join us. Good to see you.
Hello, Council. Good to see you too.
So, tell us why you are interested in serving on the Planning Commission.
So I started in community service with the Ballpark Community Council Board in the end of 2015, beginning of 2016. I started that because I was teaching an urban planning class that was focusing on the Ballpark neighborhood, and went to a couple meetings and thought, this is kind of interesting. And so just have slowly gotten involved. I'm a practicing architect, and as architects, we go to planning commission meetings quite often in many cities throughout the valley. And we always complain about the planning commission, but yet none of us will step up and actually do it. And so I decided it was probably my turn and seemed like the next step in my community service.
Okay, Councilmember Valdemoros.
Oh, I just wanted to disclose I have a personal relationship with Darren. We're friends, and we also have a business relationship as an architect and a business owner. So I just wanted to make sure that we all knew that. Thank you, Darren. I think you're going to be great. I was part of one of his classes that he invited me as a guest to review some of the projects. So thank you for the opportunity and good luck.
Thank you for helping with that class.
Great. Councilmember Wharton.
I also should disclose that I have a friendship with Darren Mano and a business relationship with him. So.
Okay, Councilmember Rogers.
Well, it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, I'm excited to have you on the Planning Commission and have your background. So.
Thank you.
I need to disclose that I do not have a friendship with Darren, but I would welcome one. So. So I served, before I was served on the council, I served on the Planning Commission, and it is a fantastic commission to be a part of. You've been in front of them on different projects, and so you know what you're getting into. So thank you for your willingness to serve in that capacity. Again, you don't have to stick around for our formal meeting. Your name will be on the consent agenda where you will be formally adopted, or your application will be formally adopted. So,
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much for your willingness.
Thank you.
Okay, Alicia Ryans is being appointed to the CDCIP Board or the Community Development and Capital Improvement Programs Advisory Board.
Yes, good evening, Council.
Thank you for being here.
Absolutely, thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you are interested in CIP programs.
Definitely. So I currently work for the Governor's Office of Energy Development, and I manage the tax incentive programs that we administer throughout the state of Utah. And I know so much about what's going on in rural Utah as far as community development, infrastructure development, and I don't know a lot about the development in which the city that goes on in which in the city in which I live. So I definitely want to be involved in this board. I think as a woman, a minority woman in the state of Utah, we're underrepresented, and our voices aren't necessarily heard as they should be. And so I would like to represent when it comes to some of these projects that affect our community in which we live in.
Great. Questions or comments for Ms. Ryans?
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I know you're going to do a great job with what you just said. It is needed, and especially when we look at, in certain neighborhoods in Salt Lake City.
Absolutely.
I love your perspective on that. So thank you for volunteering.
Most definitely.
Councilmember Fowler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the CIP process is really, for me, one of the best that we have, because we get to see what community members find important in their community, and to have the community members sort of be involved and engaged in the applications and really drive that forward is fun. And so I'm really glad to have another female minority voice on the CDCIP board, because I think that it will help our communities feel like they can and want to engage in the process. And so I'm excited for you to do this, and thank you for volunteering your time.
Yeah, most definitely. Thank you.
Great.
Amy said everything I was going to
Okay.
say.
All right. Well, Ms. Ryans, thank you very much. And as with the others, you're welcome to stick around, but you don't need to.
I've got to go to my daughter's volleyball
All
game.
right.
So I'm
Well,
heading
good
out.
luck. Hope she plays well.
Thank you, guys. She plays for West High.
Go Panthers.
Go Panthers. Thank you.
All right. And with that, our work session is adjourned. Oh, wait. One announcement. Okay.
Sorry, just one announcement, Mr. Chair. There is a Carbon Solutions Summit in Santa Fe, New Mexico that invited Councilmember Fowler to attend. It's October 2nd through 3rd, 2019. There's no cost to attend the roundtable, and the only cost to the council office would be for the airfare and hotel there. So are council members supportive of Councilmember Fowler attending the conference?
Okay. Thumbs up if you are supportive. Thumbs down if you are not.
Rude that they didn't invite anyone else, but that's fine.
I was going to say that same.
Okay. All right. Are you going to vote for yourself to go? There you go. All right.
Okay.
Okay.
That's unanimous approval of those that are here. Thank you.
Yep. All right. And with that, we are adjourned. We will reconvene in our formal meeting at 7 o'clock. So in, hour and 15 minutes. Thank you.